best we can, working with Ukraine. We'll do the best we can. But they lost a lot of territory. When you say Crimea, that was handed over during a president named Barack Hussein Obama. That had nothing to do with me, Crimea. That was 11 years ago with Obama. And they made a decision. There wasn't a bullet fired. There was no fighting. There was no anything. They just handed it over. Now they say, well, can you get it back? I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. That was given by Barack Obama when he was president, not by Donald Trump.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal that you put on the table is a 30-day ceasefire proposal. Your national security team presented it to both Ukraine and Russia. 2 months ago, Ukraine agreed to that ceasefire proposal. Immediately, Russia has not. And my question is Russia the obstacle to peace based upon that, just getting to that 30-day ceasefire?
I don't think so. I think that they both want peace right now. They're ready to do something. We'll see what happens. Complicated, very complicated. But I think they are both very much looking to make a deal. Marco, what would you say?
Well, first of all, what was put before our partners was options to discuss about things that it would take to end a war. This war is endable. Both sides just have to agree to it. We've shown them a pathway forward. We've discussed those ideas. It was a good meeting yesterday. There'll be good meetings over the weekend. We've shown them the finish line. We need both of them to say yes. But what happened last night with those missile strikes should remind everybody of why this war needs to end. It's horrible those missiles landed. What's even worse is there are today people that were alive yesterday that are not alive today because this war continues, and the president wants to stop it. And everyone should be thanking the president for being a peacemaker and trying to save lives. That's what we're trying to do here. It's not our war. We didn't start it, as you know. But we're trying to end the dying. We're trying to end the destruction. And we've shown the path forward. We can see the finish line, but both of them have to get there. We're going to do everything we can to help them get there, but they have to ultimately say yes.
And we are using a lot of pressure on both. You know, if you think we're just in there because we're nice people, and we are nice people, but we're using a lot of pressure on both.
What concessions, Mr. President, and to your national security team, what concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war. Stopping taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
Mr. President, if you are going to take down the tariffs, what do you want Norway to buy more of from the U.S.?
To buy more? Well, you don't need snow. You don't need skis. You don't need ski champions either, right? You have a lot of them. We just want to keep the relationship the way it is. We've had a great relationship. I think now maybe closer than ever, but we've had a great relationship with Norway. I think just keep it the way it is, kid. You can't do better.
Really? Not even by, say, a fight?
Well, if they want to give us some additional concessions, that's okay. You can't do much better. Yes.
Mr. President, you had a long meeting with Norway today. You said that Norway is doing a lot of things right, but on the Ukraine, if I can ask both you and the Prime Minister, did you find common ground today on Ukraine and the peace plan?
Totally. It's totally common ground. The Prime Minister can speak about it, but I can just say he wants to see people stop dying more than anything else, and he'd like to see it end. He's going to help us end it.
Mr. President, can I say that to move towards an end of this war, U.S. engagement is critical, and President Trump made that possible. That is clear, that is obvious, it's really happening. Now the important thing is that both parties have to know that they have to deliver, and they have to feel the pressure to deliver. Ukraine is under attack. They are defending themselves. Lives are being lost. And we believe very firmly that there needs to be a ceasefire. The initiative taken by the US some time ago needs to be respected. And then to move on to something which both parties can own. That is the complicated part in such a dramatic war. And here I believe Europeans and Americans working together, as we do much closer now. I salute the team of President Trump of being, open in that process. We had a good discussion on this today, and then we have to move on, and we cannot lose time because this is too much drama happening. One thing is people losing their lives, but it is a bad thing for Europe, and it's a bad thing for the world to having such a broad conflict going on. It can have ramifications far beyond Ukraine.
Mr. President, a follow-up question on China.
Mr. President, if
I forgot my question. That was, I wanted to ask about.
Sorry, that happens.
It happens sometimes. Yeah. No, Mr. President, I wanted to ask about the. Zelensky has said that he wants more Patriot missiles. So far, has been no response from the United States. If you and the United States decides to pull out of negotiating for peace, trying to broker peace, does that also mean a no on Patriot missiles, a no on sharing intelligence with Ukraine?
Let's see what happens. I think we're going to make a deal. And if we make a deal, that'll be wonderful. We won't have to worry about your question. You can ask that question in 2 weeks, and we'll see. But I think we're getting very close. The Prime Minister feels the same way, and we'll hopefully not have to answer that question.
Mr. President,
Norway is the third country to be officially invited to the White House after Liberation Day. Why did you invite Norway so soon to the White House?
Because I like them. And I like your Prime Minister, and I like the way your government runs. And I respect the King. He's highly respected in Norway. It's a great thing, not an easy thing to do. He's done a great job. Yeah.
Would you like an invitation to visit the King?
Absolutely. You get me that invitation.
I just told the President he's welcome to visit Norway.
President Trump, first point forward.
Yeah,
you said before that you like the Norwegian Petroleum Fund, and I'm wondering if that has been up for discussion today, the way that we have structured our money and whether it's...
Well, this fund was created in the late 1990s to save for future generations the income from our oil and gas. Norwegians should continue to work as hard, dedicated, innovate and move forward, despite having these incomes, which we happen to be in the period of our history where we can harvest, and we have transferred that into investments, half of them, by the way, here in the United States. So I think this is a model which we have been able to explore. If we can share experiences, and we do with our colleagues in the US, you never copy this one-to-one, but there can be techniques and way of working that we have used in organizing our fund. Jens Stoltenberg was the finance minister when the first dollar entered that fund. So he's a safe hand to have as a finance minister today. What do you say?
No, and as you said, Mr. Prime Minister, we are ready to sit down with the US to also work with them on if they want to establish a sovereign wealth fund, because we have a good experience with our fund. And I think that one example of how we work together with the United States is that half of the fund, close to $1 trillion are invested in the United States, mainly in equity, but also some in fixed income, including government bonds. So this is an expression of trust in the United States, expressed by the strong investment of the sovereign wealth fund. Then just briefly on Ukraine, since it was mentioned, we had a very good and extensive discussion about Ukraine, the path forward to peace. And as the Prime Minister said, we commend the US for pushing forward to try to find a negotiated solution. At the same time, we need to continue to support Ukraine, and therefore I'm proud that Norway has actually tripled the military support to Ukraine, and this year we will allocate close to $8 billion to Ukraine. That will strengthen them and also their hand on the negotiating table.
If I may add to that, if there's a peace, and there will be a peace, we have a common responsibility in securing democratic Ukraine for the future. And the best security guarantee they can have is the ability to defend themselves. And we are investing in that.
Mr. Prime Minister, if I may...
As it relates to tariffs, Mr. President, when you unveiled your reciprocal tariffs on April the 2nd, the tariff rate for Norway was 15%. Based upon your conversations that you've had today with the Prime Minister, do you see that tariff rate coming down from what you proposed just a few weeks ago?
Well, they have a great fund of $2 trillion. It's a big fund. And they don't have any debt. So I think they'd probably be willing to pay us more than that, I hope.
Are the two in agreement of which countries?
Mr. President,
Yes.
in 2018, your former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called for an end to Russian occupation of Crimea. Why has this administration changed its stance on territorial concessions?
Well, the war started. It would have never started if I were president. This is a war that is a horrible. All wars are horrible. This one is in particular bad. And I don't know that you can ever say there's going to be a winner to this because so many lives have been lost. Not only soldiers, a lot of lives have been lost. I think that we want to do one very simple thing. It would have never happened if I were president. Zero chance it was going to. And it didn't. You know, people say, how do you know that? Number one, it didn't happen. We never even discussed it. I would talk to Putin about it. It was the apple of his eye. You know, Ukraine was the apple of Putin's eye. But there was never even a thought that he'd go in. And I think he understood that I would not be happy if he did. And it was only when I got out, and, you know, when you mention what happened to Ukraine years ago under President Obama and a vice president that was also president later, unfortunately for this country. What happened is large chunks of land were given up, and it was called Crimea, and that was a big thing. That was a big moment. But this isn't my war. This is Biden's war. This is a war that Biden was president when this war happened. But I'm trying to put out the fire, and I think we'll be successful. And if we do, we're going to save a lot of lives. Otherwise, and the Prime Minister had a statement. He said, this is just a point in time. We're very lucky because this is a point. And if this doesn't happen, this could go on for a long time.
Mr. President, will you have meetings with other world leaders when you're in Rome, sir?
Future Democrat president?
I don't think he will. I think he wants to make peace. I think he wants to end it. And I feel pretty confident of that, but we're gonna know pretty soon.
Mr. President, will you have meetings with other world leaders when you're in Rome?
Yes, I will.
Which leaders do you want to meet, sir?
Well, I'd like to meet them all. That would be nice. I'd like to take care of all of them, but we have many of them there, and they all want to meet. They want to meet about trade. And we are making some great inroads and great deals. You might want to speak about that, Mr. Secretary.
We had a very successful bilateral meeting with the Republic of South Korea today. We may be moving faster than I thought, and we will be talking technical terms as early as next week as we reach an agreement on understanding as soon as next week. So South Koreans came early. They came with their A game, and we will see if they follow through on that.
Do you think you deserve the Nobel Peace Prize if you manage to create?
Do I deserve the Nobel Peace
If you manage to create peace?
Well, maybe for the Abraham Accords. I don't want to get ahead of myself on this one, but they say for the Abraham Accords. And by the way, speaking of that, we're going to be filling it up. A lot of countries want to come into the Abraham Accords. You know, we have 4. And Biden did nothing on that one, too. It's the same 4. But they're great countries, and they were brave doing it, and it's worked out very well. And we're going to be filling up the Abraham Accords. They're going to be, I think, filling it up very rapidly. Marco, could you say something about that?
There's great, enormous opportunity to grow the Abraham Accords. But I would just point to one thing. Of all the leaders in the world today, no leader is working harder to prevent wars or end them than President Trump is right now. That's why we're talking to Iran. That's why we're engaged with Ukraine and Russia. It's the desire to prevent these wars from breaking out and to end the ones that exist already. And again, I just think it's tremendous for our country to be led by a president who desires to bring peace and establish peace and protect peace. So it's hard work.
Mr. President.
You know, Marco just mentioned something that maybe we should talk about for just a second, if we could, Mr. Prime Minister. And you're involved in it, too, because you've been involved in the world and peace. But I think we're doing very well with respect to Iran, and we're having very serious meetings. And there are only 2 options, and the one option is not a good option. It's not a good option at all. And I think we're doing very well on an agreement with Iran, but that one, we're doing a lot of things, I will say, but that one is well on its way. We could have a very, very good decision, and a lot of lives will be saved.
Mr. President, on the economy, there was a slowdown. Mr. President, on the economy, there was a slowdown as it relates to home sales in the month of March, the slowest pace since 2009. Is that an economic indicator, and perhaps the Treasury Secretary can weigh in on this as well, is that an economic indicator that concerns you about the broader U.S. economy?
No, they had very good numbers on housing today, extremely good numbers, and that's despite interest rates, because, you know, if you look at what happened, everyone said, oh, I said I was going to get prices down. I did. Energy just hit $1.98 in a couple of states. It's way down. Energy's down, and we're about $64 a barrel. When I came in, and we were looking at $89, $90, $95. And by the way, that helps us solve the war too. Having those energy prices is a big incentive for Russia to also agree with solving the war problem. Groceries are down. When I was with you 2 months ago, you were complaining about eggs. I said I just got here. I was here for about a week when the press started saying about eggs have gone through the roof. I said, I just got here. Tell me about eggs. And they happened. They went through the roof and you couldn't get them. So we just had a big Easter egg hunt at the White House. Thousands and thousands of eggs. And the price was down 87%. So we did a great job. Housing is doing very well. We should lower interest rates. That's the Fed. I hope they lower interest rates. That's the smart thing to do. Be ahead a little bit, although already it's a little bit late. But in the end, we just have a great country. We have a very strong country, and we have every other country. I can't think of one country that doesn't want to negotiate a deal. And they either negotiate a deal or we set a deal that we think is fair. Because we don't have to go through all of these. It would be physically impossible. You know, you have so many people that really understand it, which is a very small group of people here. And we are going to, at some point, just set prices for deals. Some will be tariffed. Some treated us very unfairly. They'll be tariffed higher than others. But we've been ripped off for many, many years. The United States has been ripped off like no country probably in the history of the world has been ripped off for 45, 50 years. And countries have gotten rich by doing that with the United States. We've taken care of their militaries, and military is another subject we talk about. We're not going to make that subject to any of the deals, but you know the same countries that I do where we virtually take care of their military and then don't get treated fairly on trade. So the people, and I don't blame those countries, I blame the people that sat at that beautiful desk right behind you, because those people didn't do the job for this country, and they let us lose $4 billion a day on trade. We were losing $4 or $5 billion a day on trade when I got here, and now we're going to be much better than breaking even, and we're going to be making $4 or $5 billion a day on trade. So, I don't blame any country, not the worst of them. We were abused by countries. I blame the President of the United States that happened to be sitting when these deals were made. Disgraceful. When I was here, we had a great 4 years. We had the most successful economy in the history of our country, my first term. And we were very tough on trade. And with China, as you know, they paid hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. But nobody else ever did that. China paid not 10 cents to any other president. And but not only China, virtually every country got away with murder. And we just can't let that happen. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right, so that was President Trump speaking in the Oval Office. He was joined by a number of people, including the Prime Minister of Norway. That state visit, of course, happening right now. But also the former Secretary General of NATO, as well as Secretary of State Marco Rubio, were in the meeting with President Trump. Much of the conversation focused on the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. The administration, of course, trying to broker a peace deal. Unfortunately, overnight, Russia attacked Ukraine, and so President Trump has really scolded, if you will, Vladimir Putin for Russia going ahead with that particular attack on the Ukraine, also saying that it potentially puts at risk any potential peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. In the meantime, however, President Trump is still being optimistic, saying that he believes a deal can still be worked out, and he's hoping that deal is going to happen here in short order. In fact, in general, particularly as President Trump heads to Italy tomorrow to attend the to attend the Pope's funeral on Saturday and will be meeting with a number of world leaders. Secretary of State Marco Rubio putting in perspective what's happening right now, more importantly, President Trump's role on the global stage. Here's what he had to say.
What was put before our partners was options to discuss about things that it would take to end a war. This war is endable. First of all, what was put before our partners was options to discuss about things that it would take to end a war. This war is endable. Both sides just have to agree to it. We've shown them a pathway forward. We've discussed those ideas. There was a good meeting yesterday. There'll be good meetings over the weekend. We've shown them the finish line. We need both of them to say yes. But what happened last night with those missile strikes should remind everybody of why this war needs to end. It's horrible those missiles landed. What's even worse is there are today people that were alive yesterday that are not alive today, because this war continues, and the president wants to stop it. And everyone should be thanking the president for being a peacemaker and trying to save lives. That's what we're trying to do here. It's not our war. We didn't start it, as you know. But we're trying to end the dying. We're trying to end the destruction. And we've shown the path forward. We can see the finish line, but both of them have to get there. We're going to do everything we can to help them get there, but they have to ultimately say yes.
And we are using a lot of pressure on both, you know.
Norway's president also echoing those sentiments, saying President Trump and the United States in general are critical in reaching some sort of peace deal between Russia and Ukraine and moving the negotiations forward. We're going to take a quick break, get you back to your regularly scheduled programming. We'll, of course, have more coverage of President Trump meeting with Norway's prime minister throughout the day here on Real America's Voice.
This has been a live special report. We now join our programming already in progress.
Change because they're embarrassed and humiliated that they were wrong. That's not going to happen. They're going to change when they go out of business because you don't watch or care about the CNN poll anymore. All right, when they don't have the money
Rich,
to fund
tell me
the
how
poll.
You really feel. Tell me how you really feel.
Right.
So
I mean, let me tell the audience this. You're doing this. You're fueling this. You're popping a blood vessel every time YouGov, who hasn't gotten an election correct in like 15 years, every time YouGov puts out a poll that you pop a blood vessel over, you're doing it. Just ignore them. They're not credible. Don't read the papers that fund them. They're not credible.
So Rich, what Rich is talking about, just to zoom out a little bit, is the issue is that this generates headlines for so many news outlets, which then generates the clicks and shares to say, oh my gosh, all of a sudden, Trump is underwater on war. He's underwater on election, the stock market. Oh my gosh, look, he's totally lost this segment of the population on this issue, immigration. It's people are totally the tariff. I remember, Rich, I believe it was YouGov actually when Trump announced the tariffs. All of a sudden, YouGov Snap poll comes out like 12 hours later, and they're suddenly telling us that America hates the tariffs. And then what do? They get to go on CNN, and then they get to go on MSNBC, and then it feels like, and I understand why, but it's almost like the White House press team feels like we need to respond to the narrative that's being put out by these organizations. And what Rich is saying is the initial data that's coming in is bad. So garbage in, garbage out. You're responding to a narrative that is knowingly false. It's based on faulty assumptions. It's based on bad data. So the people that you then think you're responding to, they don't exist. And I'll just, we're coming up on the break, but I'll just put it this way. Go up to somebody who voted for President Trump in the 2024 election and ask you, do you regret your vote? Do you wish you had voted for Kamala Harris? Do you wish Joe Biden could still have been president? And see if you can find anyone who will say that they wish we had kept things going the way that they were going. I guarantee you those people don't exist. This is a false perception. It is false data. That's what's driving it. And the White House, I love them. And it's guys, don't worry about this stuff. It's fake. It's fraudulent. And look, that's why we call them the fake news. Jack Posobiec, we'll be right back.
Terrence Bates here with your Real America's Voice news break. Mourners continue flooding into St. Peter's Basilica to pay their respects to the late Pope Francis. So many people have come to see the pontiff that the Vatican decided to keep the doors open all night long due to the higher than expected turnout. Earlier this morning, the Basilica closed for about an hour and a half, but then reopened to welcome in the faithful. The Vatican says as of about 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon, more than 61,000 people had visited the Pope. As you can see from this live picture, that number has increased pretty significantly. Still, trust me, lots of people coming. Meantime, the cardinals are continuing to arrive at the Vatican in advance of Saturday's funeral and the upcoming papal conclave, during which the next pope is going to be selected. The Vatican says 113 of the expected 133 eligible cardinals have already arrived, but 2 cardinals say they won't make it to Rome due to health reasons. One of the things we do know is that President Trump will be leaving tomorrow morning to go to Rome in order to attend Saturday's funeral. Just moments ago, while meeting with the Prime Minister of Norway and other dignitaries in the Oval Office, the president talking about the fact that he's likely going to meet with a number of other world leaders who will be attending that funeral. President Trump going on to say that he expects to talk about trade issues, but very likely will also discuss the ongoing war in Russia and Ukraine. He'll also talk about a way to potentially end that war. President Trump saying that he is still optimistic a peace deal can be reached between Russia and Ukraine despite the attack last night and overnight from Russia. Still, President Trump saying that both sides need to just come to an agreement, and the United States has shown them the finish line. They just have to get over it. Meantime, back home, President Trump coming up on his 100th day in office. The White House says that he'll celebrate it Tuesday with a rally in Macomb County, Michigan. That area, by the way, is just north of Detroit, and it's known as an automotive hub. That's going to do it for your headlines. I'm Terrence Bates. We appreciate you being here with us.
And Jack, where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, Jack Posobiec, here we are back. It's today's edition of Human Events Daily. Look, folks, I think it's no one's surprise that I've been at the White House recently, numerous times, that I've been traveling with administration officials. The media, of course, loves to report this every so often as much as they can. But, you know, when you're in these various environments, or when you're traveling to Ukraine with Secretary of Treasury, you know, communications security is paramount. Who is getting into your devices? Also, you know, when it comes to the secretary, when it comes to their security, and of course they have Secret Service for the physical security, but they also have to make sure that his communication security is protected, and incredibly, of course, because of all of the documents and sensitive information that he is privy to in a real-time basis. And of course, whenever you're around the president, it only ratchets up further and further. So what does this make us think? Well, as consumers, as people who all have those cell phones in our pockets and around us and the laptops and everything else, we need to start thinking about our own communications security. And that's where Silent comes in. Silent provides Faraday products that block all incoming and outgoing signals so that your devices are safe from the outside world, from their backpacks, phone sleeves, and even pants. Yes, pants. Their patented signal blocking technology blocks wireless signals, giving you peace of mind that your data doesn't end up in the wrong hands. Just place your device inside, close it, and that's it. You're safeguarded from unauthorized access. So between the government, big tech, corporate America, and criminals, your privacy is compromised already 24/7. There's no other option. You have to protect yourself. And that starts with Silent. How do you get it? Go silent today at slnt.com/POSO to save 15% plus free shipping on qualifying orders. Stay ahead of what's coming. Secure your privacy today. Again, that's slnt.com/POSO for 15% off and free shipping. This is Jack Posobiec. We're on with Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Rich, you've been going through and walking us really down this line about how the media runs these fake push polls to generate their narratives, to generate false perceptions of reality. You know, and I love it because then Saturday rolls around and here's Trump and Elon, and they're walking into the UFC, and everybody's cheering, and everybody's like on their feet for him, and Mel Gibson saluting from the front row, and you're like, wait a minute. The people still like the guy. This is not a situation where there's this like massive outcry against Trump the way that the media would have you believe. But that being said, Rich, we do need to understand and tell the truth about what's going on. And we know, of course, that President Trump, when it comes down to it, has been making some very big changes and talking about even bigger changes. We know this has spooked the market the way that this always happens, particularly on the economy. And that's why on this issue, I did want to drill in, Rich. What are you seeing in those numbers when it comes down to it? Because, look, these, for better or worse, you know, personally, I think that America has invested too much in the stock market. I think this is something that ultimately perhaps has gotten too much exposure to the average American. This is like a casino culture, and yet suddenly we're told this is the best way to expand our money, and because of course this is the way we've set ourselves up financially. I don't usually pop off on this, but I guess I just am. So that being said, though, that is where a lot of people have their money. So, Rich, what are you seeing on the economic front?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me, Jack, in the period of, let's call it globalization, when they changed the economy from a goods-producing economy to a primarily service sector, reliant, market-based economy. And I don't mean markets the way people think. I mean stock market-obsessed based economy. They've collapsed it. no less than 2 times in order to change the economy into a cheap goods, no manufacturing, no living wage economy. It was going to take disruption to be able to change it back, which is the agenda that people did vote for. And so I just want people to understand, I'm not saying here that there's not economic concern. And for those who watch my show, everyone knows for weeks I've been very critical of the White House's messaging because I think they're reactive instead of being proactive, and they're not speaking in the terms that I think they should be speaking in or think would be effective. All right, so I'm not absent criticism, but the truth is, it is the narrative you're hearing right now about the economy and everything is being.
We're not the left.
That's right. I mean, it's being pushed by people who were never honest to begin with, right? And what I really see is a similar situation to what happened with Reagan when he was elected in, of course, the 1980 election. He was hammered from the day he took office in 81 after those tax cuts and the reforms that he pushed. He was hammered all the way up until 83 when the economy started to turn around. He needed to implement a little bit of pain in order to fix what the Carter and others, it wasn't just Jimmy Carter, but in order to, get the country back in the right direction, he needed to implement some pretty big changes. And it wasn't, the benefits were not immediate. It hurt and people were concerned. I just think that everything needs to be put in its proper context. Most of the concern right now is not being driven by the reality of higher prices. It's being driven by the perception that there will be higher prices, and it's being driven by a certain group's perception. All right. It is not a bad thing. You just mentioned the UFC. It is not a bad thing to be the party of younger, less white people. Okay, it is not a bad thing to be the party of people maybe who now vote at lower rates, but in the future are the growing demographics of this country. You're reacting to negative sentiment that is being put out and being exacerbated because these people take polls, but particularly older voters who don't really care about what the economy will look like 10 years from now, Jack. They care about what they had saved up for their golden years right now, and they care about whether or not Social Security will be enough. I cannot tell you when we poll how many times I hear from, let's just call it 60 and above, how many times we will hear in a single polling session, Elon Musk is going to take my Social Security. Okay, I mean, I cannot tell you how many times we hear something like that. That is what is
and so much of that, by the way, comes from what you hear. You hear Democrats say this, and yes, broadcast media and cable media just regurgitate it. They just Elon's never said anything about that. He's actually spoken out against it so many times. President Trump has been against it, but they know that's the button to press for those voters. It doesn't matter how many times President Trump has said it's a lie. They will just lie.
That's right, and you need to expect that. Look at what I'm saying is here. Don't miss the forest through the trees. Step back and look at the bigger picture. All right. I mean, if you course correct now, if you're the Trump administration, and you think you're course correcting, and you change course now and try to go back to business as usual, you're going to forsake all of the. All right, and it's time, I really don't know how else to say this. The president's a bigger thinker guy. You have to look past your own presidency and agenda right now. And if you want your legacy to survive, you're going to need these voters to keep voting for people who have the same letter after your name on the ballot in subsequent elections. In the present short term, all right, let's say present to like short term future, it is going to be a little bit tough at the ballot box during special elections, et cetera, et cetera. But the younger generation is basically the most conservative generation we've seen in 50 years. I don't know what, I don't know
Rich,
why.
We've been talking about this. We've been talking about this
30
on the show
House seats,
all
Jack,
week.
To have a Roosevelt coalition for 30 years.
That is, it is the, you now have this situation where millennials and Gen Y are the most right-wing generation in America by almost 10 points, according to Real Clear Politics. Almost 10 points. So, yes, we've seen the 70 plus have like a negative 14 deficit, but it's blowing. And by the way, you're not going to see this headline anywhere. I want to say, like, outside of me and you and like Charlie Kirk, no one is talking about this, that it's millennials. Remember the millennials, the stupid, lazy millennials who can't do anything, who can't do anything right, who are ruining America. Guess what? they are the ones who realize that the system doesn't work for them, and they love that Trump is fighting the system. That's what people elected Trump to do. These are the ones who, and I'm not going to relitigate the whole thing, but they like the change versus what you're talking about, the people at the other end of the age spectrum. And it is economic. A lot of this is economic driven, folks. Correction. All of this is economic driven, that they're the ones the system has worked for, and that's why they don't like the changes. So what President Trump is doing is saying, look, we're going to do the best to take care of everybody, but the generation that's coming up right now, they need change, and that's what they voted for.
And I would say this too, even that number that you just flashed on the screen is exaggerated because, I mean, I don't want to go through this, but we've talked about this a lot. Going in, I told you he was not going to perform as poorly with seniors as the poll suggested going to the election. There are myriad reasons for this that we have discussed. Polls are very bad. The younger people are underrepresented, by the way, in those surveys, and the older people are overrepresented and not even polled correctly. All right. Let me just the sample sizes alone. I can tell I already know the answer to this question, but you do any post-stratification? You do any multi-level regression? You did not. Your sample is not big enough. When we do, and this is why people should go to the Public Polling Project, support the Public Polling Project. Yes, that is a pitch. Go to Big Data Poll and do it. This is why we break down age details the way we do and why we stress that in this day and age, bigger is better. All right, bottom line, you need much larger samples. And the reason and look at what Ann Seltzer did in Iowa. She was a perfect example of this. She completely mispolled the senior vote. Their samples are not big enough to even do that level of analysis or that granular level of weighting because they're not breaking up the 50 to 64s, the 65 to 74s, the 75 pluses. Laura hates it when I get into detail like this on shows because she thinks I'm telling other pollsters who are bad at their job secrets that they should figure out on their own, and she's probably right, but it's true. They do not have representative or large enough samples for each of these subgroups to do the level of weighting that is necessary to see whether or not you are accurately polling these age groups. And they were a bust going into the election. So now why? Again, how many states did Reuters poll correctly? How many states did the New York Times poll correctly? How many states did Maris poll correctly? And I could just keep going because none of them did. There were like 3 of us who did a good job. And I'm telling you, it's because they're not doing any of this. They get it all wrong. They basically gave Harris a massive advantage with seniors that she never had. By the way, they did it for Biden too. And this has been a trend that's been happening for years.
And you know what?
And now here we are again.
This isn't what was reflected at the box office, at the polling. This wasn't what was reflected at the ballot box. Yeah. Be right back. Jack Posobiec, Rich Barris, Human Events Daily.
public, and it turns out the public can hold conflicting views even within themselves. Part of my job to figure out, okay, where do they actually feel on the overall immigration picture? And I think it's important to note, as we have mentioned, is that Donald Trump's net approval rating on immigration is actually positive, which is very much unlike his first term. If you ask, are we on the right track or the wrong track when it comes to immigration policy, the plurality say that we're on the right track, which is very different from where we were just a few months ago under Joe Biden. So yeah, you see those polling and you see it's conflicting. It kind of actually reminds me a little bit of the gun control debate, right? Where you see, oh my God, 90% background checks. And then of course you look at ballot measures in places like Nevada and Maine. And then when it's actually on the ballot, it's basically 50-50. In my opinion, on this particular topic, what we're really talking about and the metric we should be looking to is, do people like, when they ask, do you like what Donald Trump's doing on immigration? And if the plurality says yes, which is what's going on, then that's the number that I think is most representative of the public at large.
When I'm working long hours, I'm always listening to Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we're here for our final segment with Rich Barris. And, you know, as we come to President Trump's first 100 days, his second 100 days, in a sense, because it's the second administration, let's take a look back, because we're almost coming up, and this will be here very soon, on the 10-year anniversary of President Trump coming down that golden escalator. And remember what the world was like in 2015. If you were a Republican and you mentioned the word deportations, you were pushed to the side. You were shunned. You were publicly attacked by the media. You were far right because you wanted illegal aliens out of the country, or God forbid, you wanted to maintain the current standard of the country that we live in now. You wanted peace. You didn't want congestion in your cities. You didn't want this creaking education system, healthcare system, housing situation, all of these problems that are exacerbated because there are too many people in this country, or the fact that you don't like the cheap foreign labor being imported that's literally pushing people out of their own jobs in places like Disney, where they were having to train their own foreign replacements. You were considered a psycho. And now you look what's going on. They turn around and say, you know what, on this question, even CNN has to admit it, that Trump is ascendant on this issue, that Trump won on this issue. His entire political career is because he got this right. And in addition, all of the incredible talents and everything else that he's accomplished. But he was right on the money when it came to this issue where the American people are. Rich Barris, want to bring you in here. And I really do think that it's incredible that look at where, you know, just as we talk about, you know, the trajectory of things, look at where the Republican Party has come since the autopsy of 2012 to today on this issue. It is night and day, and these people have absolutely fallen. They have absolutely fallen. And I got to just say one more thing before we get out, is that to the Republicans in D.C., if you think, oh, well, we'll just slow roll Trump and then we'll go back to the Mitt Romney, Jeb Bush. No. Those type of candidates are never going to win again. If you do try to go back to that kind of party, not only will you destroy the coalition, Maha, as well, what you're going to end up with is a world where the far left, like the Luigis, actually take over. Rich Barris.
Yeah, that CNN clip, that was actually interesting. What he's essentially referring to is the wording of surveys. That is what he's being critical. I am forced to say that Harry is right here. He's not right often, but when he is, he is. What he's saying is the survey wording is not getting to the core of public opinion. And it's a great example is background check and gun control. Oh my God, 90% support, these databases and doing background checks, right? But then when these measures get thrown on ballots and initiatives in competitive states, they get thrashed, or at best, like he said, it's 50-50. We see this with a lot of issues, Jack. The bottom line is tariffs. Do you or would you support what Trump is doing with tariffs, and do you support the end goal? Are you willing to take little bit of pain in order to get to like this better future. I mean, they're not really wording these questions like that. They're like, do you support tariffs that are going to increase the cost of prices? I mean, so that's what he's referring to. And the funny thing about the autopsy is this: Donald Trump's Republican Party is exactly what the so-called autopsy of 2012 called for the party to become. And yet the very people who commissioned, the very, politicos who commissioned it, the very donors who paid for it, they're the ones who are making they pose the biggest threat to Donald Trump's White House, his coalition, and the ultimate success of the policy agenda. And I find that to be very ironic, whatever you want to call it, and I have for many years. This is the party the autopsy said they wanted. This is the party the autopsy claimed they needed to get in order to survive as a national political force. They got younger people. They got more black voters. They got more Hispanic voters. They are the party of the rising demographics. And that is amazing since, once upon a time, we were all obsessing over a book called The Emerging Democratic Majority, which argued that demographics were destiny and that Democrats would be the ascendant party and there was nothing Republicans could do about it. That, of course, I always thought was faulty because this is something Republicans need to remember right now. Demographics or destiny is a flawed theory because political coalitions, the only thing they're consistent with, Jack, is that they consistently evolve. And the policy that parties support, I believe in rational policy choice, the policies that parties support, they back and they advance. Absolutely.
And that's how you keep the coalition together. Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Please go follow him. peoplespundit.locals.com. The Big Data Poll. I am Jack Posobiec. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.
They tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro,
Steve Bannon,
now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
This is America's Voice Live.
And welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Garrett.
The pulse of the people.
We need somebody that's going to hear the people's voice.
The truth the mainstream won't touch.
This guy is by definition a globalist.
And the stories that matter.
Rav's own Ben Berquam.
Right up over this hill, we got armed cartel. I see him.
Live.
Breaking news right now here on Real America's Voice.
Unfiltered.
These people are domestic terrorists.
And unapologetic.
We're here to take a stand for God and country. Let's feel good, doesn't it?
America's Voice Live starts now.
All right, welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Garrett. It's Thursday, the 24th of April. Let's get to today's top stories. Thank you, as always, for spending time with us here on Real America's Voice. We've got a lot to cover today, so we're going to just dive right in. Just yesterday, I had the opportunity to visit with the White House and visit with a whole host of folks there, multiple members of the President Trump's team and administration. One of the interviews that stood out to me was my interview with White House senior advisor to MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, Callie Means, because, look, let's get to it. The bottom line is that Americans are fat, stressed out, have heart disease, diabetes, and a slew of other mental and physical problems. And it has to change, and soon. Hopefully it will begin to go that way under President Trump's administration. Take a look at what Callie Means had to say about it all.
I had the good pleasure to spend a lot of time with Bobby during the elections, did a 2-hour town hall with him just before the election in Michigan. We haven't gotten any healthier since then, but at least we're finally trying, Callie. Good to be here. I'm glad you're here. The list of things I just gave you, I mean, I was just writing some things down. I mean, obesity, diabetes, ADHD, autism, depression, anxiety, high blood pressure. We're a mess.
When Bobby Kennedy was sworn in, President Trump signed an executive order. He said, in 100 days, I want to report on why we're getting so sick, what the trend lines are. I'm working on that. It's going to be May 22nd. It's going to be a big day. But it's shocking. One thing that stood out to me, there's 212 countries where they have cancer rates for measurements.
Right.
We are the worst. 212. So we today in the United States have the highest rates of cancer of any society in the history of human civilization.
Here's what I do, and I've talked about this a number of times on the program. Callie, if you took a photograph of a high school graduating class 1965, 1985, 2005, 2025, we look like a different species. You look like a person did in 1965. You look of a normal size, whatever. I'm a little bit, thicker than I should be. But I go out in the street. You look at people. The obesity in this country is unbelievable. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
I'm a conservative. I'm a libertarian. And, 15 years ago, I was a lobbyist for the food industry. And it's personal choice. What is so shocking, and I think what should wake all our consciences up, is looking at a picture right now of 6-year-olds.
Oh, good Lord.
It is not exactly. It is not the free market.
No.
That we have
child
an
abuse.
epidemic of diabetes and obesity among 6-year-olds, that 38% of teens are pre-diabetic, and that almost 50% of teens are overweight or obese.
So
there's
here's my
clearly
question.
something happening.
There's something happening. It's been happening since I was born. Since 1965, there's been this evolution to expansion. I tell this story. When I was in high school, the biggest kid on the football team was 205 pounds. You wouldn't even start in the line at the same high school that I went to at 205 pounds today. So I have to ask myself, I know that a lot of the food dyes have been targeted recently, but you have food and you have food-like products. If you go around the outside of a grocery store, you have food. The bakery, the butcher, the fresh fruits and vegetables, the dairy department. You go to the middle of the store, you got food-like products. They taste like food, smell like food, but they're prepackaged, highly processed, and there's got to be an affiliation here between the obesity and all this prepackaged food.
Well, I go back, the processed food industry was created by the tobacco industry. Let's just state facts, right? That's not conspiracy theories. The tobacco industry in the 1980s, as smoking rates were going down, bought, Philip Morris bought Kraft and U.S. Food, R.J. Reynolds bought lot in Nabisco. So the cigarette industry controlled 40% of the U.S. food supply in 1990. And they lobbied for the food pyramids, recommended ultra-processed food. The USDA nutrition guidelines have been totally bought off. 19 of the 20 advisors of USDA nutrition under Biden were paid for by the food and farm industry. So we've co-opted the nutrition guidelines, which to this day recommend added sugar for 2-year-olds as part of a nutritious diet, and do not take a stand on ultra-processed food. Last year, President Biden issued a report from the USDA saying that a diet 93% in ultra-processed food could be healthy for kids. The problem with ultra-processed food is there are science experiments. You've been able to jam these dyes in, which are now banned as of yesterday from the FDA. But up until yesterday, the FDA said that petroleum-based dyes, crude oil, that's what they're derived from.
Petroleum-based.
Petroleum-based. They're crude oil.
Yeah.
They add one molecule to crude oil, and it's that bright neon red. Every other country, literally, in the world has phased these out of the food supply. And there is a responsibility. If you're showing, think about what a study would look like. How do you even study this? You would give a bunch of kids crude oil and see what happens. We know what happens. Any parent can tell you what happens. When kids get hopped up on these dyes, there's huge ADHD issues, there's neurological issues. So we have 10,000 chemicals in our food that actually the FDA doesn't even know about, because the food industry is able to add chemicals into our food without any safety testing, which is crazy.
So they game the system.
They've absolutely gamed the system.
And you know, because you worked there.
I worked there. They've gamed the system. The FDA, up until the Trump administration, has been a sock puppet of a food industry that, you know, they're good people, but they want to make food cheap and addictive. They have scientists right now.
That's right. Sugar, salt, fat. It's a combination to make
They're
your
doing a
taste buds
science
dance,
experiment
right?
where evolutionarily you can't overeat grass-fed steak or broccoli. You know, food that there aren't obesity epidemics in the wild among animals.
That's right.
We've never had this problem. The
And you
processed
go to
food,
countries like Italy, you don't see problems like this either.
No. In Italy, the processed food consumption for a child is 15%.
Right.
Here
What
it's
is it?
70%.
So look, I live in a state. I live in Michigan.
Great.
We have Cereal City. There it is.
Oh, right.
We've got it all.
Kellogg's.
Absolutely. Been making Kellogg's cereal for my entire life, right? Since 1900, when cornflakes were a health food, right? But that's what's been pushed on people. You know, you have Fruit Loops for breakfast, which have these colorations, or you have, Cap'n Crunch or whatever, which is probably not the best thing you could eat.
Well, this is what Secretary Kennedy and Donald Trump, as President Trump, have been talking about, is that let's first look at the incentives. They actually had big action on SNAP food stamps, $140 billion program. Right now, that program goes mostly to ultra-processed junk food. The top item on food stamps is soda. So it's a free country. President Trump loves his Diet Coke. Nobody's trying to ban Coke.
Right.
But we should not be paying for it with a supplemental nutrition program.
Correct.
Cut that subsidy. Number two, stop recommending this stuff. So when parents are serving, and me in the 90s growing up with the food pyramid, we're being served cereal, we're being served processed food. That was following government advice. So another thing Secretary Kennedy's doing, let's at least have the USDA guidelines. That's not regulation. That's just America. It should say kids should not eat sugar. It should say kids should eat whole food. That's not what they say right now.
That's not it.
So get the science right, get the incentives right. And I do think, actually, you would never expect this. President Trump has awoken this conversation in America where people are looking at labels, people are caring about the quality of their food. That's really positive. There's going to be a lot of education.
We need a lot more label readers in this country.
100%.
Absolutely.
We're going to have great transparency
Two
on
things
labels.
about that. Number one, find out what's in your food and where it comes from. We need more food grown and produced here in America as opposed to coming from all over the world. We need American-made food, American farms, American farmers, 100%. I want to ask you about something else. Bobby said that by September, I don't know how he arrived at this, some ideas about autism. I want to ask you about something different, though, because I did some deep dives and reading and some specials about PFAS and PFOAs and the forever chemicals and those that are in, it's in this, probably in this carpet around us, it's in pizza boxes, it's in microwave popcorn bags, it's in everybody, you, me, it's in polar bears that have never seen a delivery pizza. Is there some relationship between autism? Because there are some people that say there's a relationship between these PFAS forever chemicals and this epidemic of autism we see in this country. Would you say there's a possibility of a relationship?
Absolutely. I'll talk about high level. I don't think this is even controversial. We need to look at autism through the lens of the fact that every single chronic disease is up all at once.
Yeah.
Right? We're clearly, the medical system right now is siloed. Autism is a separate diagnosis and treatment plan than obesity, than heart disease, than kidney disease, than fatty liver disease. They're all separate doctors, separate treatment plans. When people say, autism is just an overdiagnosis, are we overdiagnosing, or has there been different diagnoses for obesity? We can see that with our eyes.
Yeah,
right? right?
walk down the street.
Everything is going up all at once. And clearly, and this is not even controversial, no scientist would even dispute this, there's clearly some link between our gut dysfunction, our microbiome, and autism. And I think it's a very reasonable hypothesis to think that the poisoning, and I do call it poisoning, of the PFAS, of the food, of our environment.
Well, it creates thyroid issues, it creates cancer issues, it creates kidney issues. I mean, that's pretty well
and these are
defined.
And these are not clear-cut policy solutions. I mean, truly, even artificial light has really messed with our hormones. If you turn a light on in a chicken coop, literally just a light, they lay 2 times more eggs. Like,
that's right.
Like we're our circadian rhythm with the sun. I mean, again, we're not banning art, but
the chickens don't live as long, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So we should. It's not cell phone radiation. Like these are just things that we should acknowledge and be able to make public policy for. Right now, we're spending $5 trillion on sick care. We're poisoning ourselves and then trying to drug it away, right? We're poisoning kids and then the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends Ozempic. We just actually need the science. This is what's so profound. We just need to know what's happening.
Let me ask you this, Kelly.
Yeah.
Shouldn't the American Academy of Pediatrics and doctors in general learn something about nutrition in medical school? They teach almost nothing about nutrition. If we put good things in, wouldn't we have good results? And I go back to Italy. It's an easy go-to. You go there, you can eat a plate full of pasta. You don't feel rotten. You don't feel bloated. And you don't weigh 500 pounds.
I think one of the biggest trends of the past 100 days with the Trump administration is institutional change. You've seen them taking on Harvard. Why the hell is Harvard entitled to billions of dollars of government grants? Without a question. What is the ROI? The NIH, and I know Jay Bhattacharya is looking at this, they give $50 billion a year to these often woke academic institutions who I can't find a study in the last 10 years that has actually helped American health. It's all pharmaceutical R&D. Why isn't our NIH grants tied to doing foundational research, and maybe those schools actually teaching what causes a disease? My sister went to Stanford Med School. Not a single nutrition class. Not one nutrition class at that school.
Here's the difference, and you mentioned it earlier, and here's the difference that I want the people listening and watching to understand. That 6-year-old, they don't have a lobbyist.
No, they don't.
That farmer in Iowa probably doesn't have a lobbyist, but Coca-Cola does,
absolutely,
and Pepsi does, and PepsiCo does, and Fritos does, and Taco Bell does, and all these. And I'm not picking on those people; those are just people that pop into mind of knowing. Look, this is not what you should be eating. Everything in moderation. The problem is we don't do anything in moderation in America anymore. Are you optimistic? Can we move the needle? We're doing it for the first time in American history that I can tell. Are we on the right path finally?
I'm very optimistic. Let's be clear. There are demonic forces against children in this country. A child that is sick and depressed
is a gold
and getting gender transition surgery and in fear, that child is extremely profitable. A sick, addicted, depressed child is a gold mine because chronic disease...
And that is evil.
It is evil. There are demonic forces that are profiting from children being in fear, being addicted, being sick. I mean, imagine just for the tech industry, for the pharmaceutical industry, for the food industry, for the technology, for a child that is addicted to their phone, a child that is on drugs, a child that's eating ultra-processed food, a child that does not understand the interconnectivity of their body and how to thrive is a very profitable child. Chronic disease is such a powerful invention because the child doesn't die. They just suffer. But that suffering leads to profit that's paid for by our government. So we have a very, very dark forces. I'm optimistic because Secretary Kennedy and President Trump galvanized voters for this issue.
They did.
When Secretary Kennedy is in a meeting, with various people or stakeholders, I see a light behind him of Maha Moms. The legitimacy he has to pursue this issue
because moms
from
don't
the
want
voters.
sick kids. They want their kids to be healthy and to thrive.
And when I was on this issue for the past couple of years, 3 years ago, I was talking to a bunch of senators, lawmakers. Oh, we agree with this, but it's really not a voting issue. People don't vote on this issue. It's a voting issue right now. That's what Donald Trump and President and Secretary Kennedy have done. They have made health a voting issue. So now kids have a lobbyist for them, and that's Secretary Kennedy. That's President Trump. I think one of the uniting themes of this administration is they're protecting kids.
So much to talk about when it comes to health in this country. It's an important topic. It is a voting issue, without question. Kelly Means, fascinating conversation now. After the break, Ukrainian authorities say Russia is responsible for an overnight missile and drone attack on Kyiv that left multiple casualties and dozens more injured. Details straight ahead on America's Voice Live. Russia is responsible for an overnight missile and drone attack in Kyiv that left numerous casualties and fatalities, dozens more injured, including children, we're told. President Trump has demanded that Russian President Vladimir Putin halt strikes on Kyiv as Washington continues its efforts to broker a peace deal in the region between the two nations. Trump and the administration officials have claimed they've had productive talks with Putin, and earlier today, President Trump himself announced that he is giving Ukraine 48 hours to accept a peace deal. Several members of the administration suggested that the U.S. could end its efforts to secure peace in the region if Ukraine and Russia continue to refuse to participate. Here with me to discuss this is the National Security Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Steve Yates. Steve, nice to see you again. So this attack on Kyiv, a significant escalation. Obviously, we're not making a lot of progress with bringing peace to the region. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it is deeply, deeply frustrating to President Trump. I think he said as much, so not a stretch for me to put words in his mouth. He's doing, I think, more than anyone in recent years to actually try to frame out some kind of sustainable peace. And his top objective is to stop the killing. And Russia has not stopped the killing. And so that, I think, is immensely frustrating. And he still has hopes of negotiating terms to get Russia to the table. He's been open about his frustration with dealing with the leader of Ukraine as well. But I can't see any positives out of what was transpiring with this recent attack, the deaths, the wounded, and I think the greatest wound from a strategic point of view is these talks don't show signs of progress yet, and you need to be seen doing good in politics.
No, I don't see progress. I don't see that they're moving the needle at this point, although they're trying. And I will not dismiss the efforts of this administration. They've got some talented people there trying to work this out. Here's what concerns me. The latest peace deal came back with Zelensky of Ukraine saying, either we get Crimea back and we get everything back or there's no deal. Newsflash. He's not getting Crimea back. He can sit there and argue about it. It's not happening. I predicted this a long time ago. I don't think you're getting the Donbass back or some other regions of the eastern part of Ukraine. It's not going to happen. If your demand is that all territory has to be returned, I'm sorry, that's a non-starter. And what will happen is Russia will continue to grind and grind and grind, and you'll see more attacks like we saw today. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong, and I think this also is what is contributing to the frustration the president is dealing with. This is escalating demands on the part of the country that needs help. And so if you're the one in need, you shouldn't be making it hard to be your friend. And when it comes to the Crimea, this just reminds me of childhood lessons from my grandfather when I would say something about fairness, and my grandfather would say there's no such thing as fairness. And so this is really what we're talking about. In principle, this belongs to Ukraine. It shouldn't have been taken, but it was taken 10 years ago. And what did the European Union, NATO, and others do at the time? Nothing. And so you've got the passage of a lot of time, territory lost, completely controlled by the opposition. That's hard to change. So the best you can do is probably stop the killing if we can achieve that, and then have these contested areas be some kind of monitored peace zones where you try to then figure out how to draw the maps. That's the best you can hope for, I would think, under these circumstances.
Well, you're exactly right. Look, Russia is not giving up its naval base on the Black Sea that's in Crimea. That's simply not going to happen. They're not going to give up access to that naval base. They believe it's theirs because, well, it is. Here's the concern. 10 years ago, Barack Obama also did nothing except talk a little bit, did nothing to turn what had happened in Crimea around. But here's something else that I find concerning, very concerning, in fact, if you would help me with this. I just saw reports a short while ago that the missiles that went into Kyiv were North Korean ballistic missiles. What do you know about that?
Well, I don't know more information about that, but the involvement of both North Korea and China in this war machine has been one of the underappreciated elements of this. In some ways, it's been minimized. I think willful minimization by people who want to demonize Russia more than the other contributors. I'm not saying Russia is a saint. They're the invader. They're the aggressor. They're killing people. But China's contributed to this war machine, and North Korean personnel and equipment equipment have gone into it as well. I don't know if that speaks to Russia not having as many options as we imagine from a big power, and they're having to rely on North Koreans. That's embarrassing. But at the same time, they're just throwing it out there, and this is still continuing the carnage, no matter where it comes from. So it's it's a bigger problem than Putin, and so far there's no signs of stopping it.
Yeah, one more quick question here, because the point you just made is one that I've been looking at this whole time. If Russia can't take Ukraine, which most of us, I think, thought it'll be a 2, 3, 4 week war, that'll be over, Russia has taken Ukraine, we move on. It's been 3 years, and it has not happened. And it looks like Russia's woefully unprepared. They need to use military equipment from North Korea and China. I don't believe they're going into Poland or anywhere else. I don't think they have the ability to do that. Real quick, what do you think of that observation?
Well, we can never say never, but I agree with the general proposition. It's a completely different prospect, attacking an actual military that is prepared, that is a NATO member. We were not in an alliance with Ukraine. Ukraine was not a member of the European Union or NATO. And so it's kind of apples and oranges to suggest all these things are the same. And I think it matters that this has been a grinding war of attrition. Russia still has advantages, but not to pick up and go elsewhere and be expansive. So I think we can't say that there's zero chance, but I don't think you can say it's a given that because of their perceived success in Ukraine, the march continues.
Yeah, their success in Ukraine limited at best at this point. Steve, greatly appreciate you being here for your insights. Thank you so much.
A pleasure. Thank you.
All right, now tax day may have passed, but for millions of us, the real trouble is still coming. If you missed the April 15th deadline or still owe back taxes, the IRS is ramping up enforcement every day. You wait only to make things worse. With over 5,000 new tax liens filed every single day and tools like property seizure, bank levies, and wage garnishments out there, well, the IRS is applying pressure at levels we haven't seen in years. Increased administrative scrutiny means collections are moving fast. The good news, there's still time for Tax Network USA to help you. Self-employed or a business owner, that's okay. Even if your books are a complete mess, they've got you covered. Tax Network USA specializes in cleaning up financial chaos and getting you back on track and fast. Even after the deadline, it's not too late to regain your control. Your consultation is free. And acting now could stop the penalties, the threatening letters, and surprise levies before they escalate. Call 1-800-905-8000 or visit tnusa.com/RAV. You may have missed April 15th, but you haven't run out of time yet or options. Let Tax Network USA help before the IRS makes the next move. Coming up after the break, I'll bring on our very own Brian Glenn, who I was with yesterday there at the White House. We've got to sit down with the Federal Housing Finance Agency Director and a spokesman for the National Security Council. I'll check in with Brian after the break. many of your minds right now, especially young Americans, is the topic of home affordability. People want to be able to buy a house or just be able to live somewhere. Over the last 4 years, we've seen inflation cripple the economy. Many Americans' chance of buying a home has evaporated. Our very own Brian Glenn had a chance to sit down with the U.S. Director of Federal Housing earlier today, Bill Pulte. Here's part of what he had to say.
Well, we have to bring back the American dream of home ownership. In the first term of President Trump, people could afford a home. But for the last 4 years, costs have gone crazy. You have inflation that's out of control, and you know what happens when inflation gets out of control? Mortgage rates go up. And so the home ownership has become totally out of touch, and we are doing everything we can, and I feel very confident that we will restore the American dream for Americans of any size and earning potential, et cetera.
Yeah, joining me now, Chief White House Correspondent for Real America's Voice, Brian Glenn, standing about where the two of us stood yesterday. Brian, good afternoon.
Yeah, right here. Exactly, right here.
Yeah, right there. Look, home affordability, and not just mortgages. I'm talking about rent payments.
Yeah. I wanted to ask him something that I think resonated with. I wanted to ask him a question that resonated with all Americans, and that was one of the things that President Trump had said on the campaign trail of kind of bringing back the affordability in obtaining the American dream. And it was about buying your first home, and so many young people coming out of college facing kind of an economic crisis, especially after Joe Biden in the economy that he's left us. So that was one of my main features on that. And I even approached it and asked him, well, you know, with the tariffs and an additional costs coming on goods and lumber and timber, and he said, well, hang on a second. I said, we don't necessarily rely on that, and a lot of we have our own resources, and so a lot of the home building, at least domestically, right, is coming from stuff that we make, and he's also focused on mortgage rates and lending and what the Fed is doing, and just making it affordable for young people to buy a home. Because when you look at everything, I always say there's 3 M's, Steve. It's marriage, mortgage, and munchkins. And President Trump has often talked about this, and mortgage is a big part of being financially connected with what's going on in this country right now, and having home ownership is really a big part of living the American dream. And so one of the things that I think is a part of what Joe Biden and kind of the left would bring a part of was like you would own nothing and you would be happy. And of course, that is not living the American dream. That is living what would be considered, a slave to the economic conditions that they laid out. But President Trump lays out a very much different plan for America. It is home ownership. It's being safe in your communities. I mean, nobody wants to live and buy a home and invest in a community that is, ravaged with crime in your community. Earlier, also sat down with Brian Hughes, which is a big part of talking about security. Let's take a look, listen to what he had to say.
The cyberspace is the new battle zone for the world. Every day, American government, American industry are attacked, or attempts are made to attack in cyberspace from China, Iran, Russia, the major powers that are out there and do not share our values in the world, make attempts every day to disrupt our economy, disrupt our defense, disrupt our everything about our nation.
There you go. So really, it talks about being secure, and the cyber thing is one of the things that I asked them about, how secure. I know we can secure the border, we can secure things domestically in a country, but when it comes to cyber attacks, I remember seeing a report that just how much attacks we get from China into U.S. companies to not only hack the system, ransomware, things like that, but they also get in there and kind of clone, if you will, a lot of the intellectual property that a company has, and then end up ownership, stealing that, and then replicating that. So U.S. security, home ownership security, it's all part of kind of living the American dream and this utopia that we call the United States of America. And that was one of the things that we had earlier. I also spoke with Paula White, who is a senior advisor to President Trump on the Faith Office as well. We talked about the importance of faith in our government, faith in our law and order, and from a cultural standpoint. And, you know, it's also one of those things that we have to have in order to live a safe and secure life. We'll have more of American Voice Live right here on Real America's Voice after the break. Stick around.
In Washington about spending caps, reconciliation rules, and budget timelines can get complicated. But one thing is clear. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has delivered real benefits to American families and to small business as well. Lower tax rates, a doubled standard deduction, and relief for small business owners helped boost take-home pay and drive economic growth. Now, many of those provisions are, well, they're going to expire. Here with me to discuss this, the Executive Vice President for the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Brandon, nice to see you today. Obviously, the president would like to get this all put together. He'd like one big, beautiful bill in reconciliation that'll cover all this, extend the tax cuts, probably provide some more. How important do you think this is for this country and this economy?
It's tremendously important. I mean, if you allow these tax cuts to expire at the end of the year, as they're scheduled to do, the average family of four making $80,000 a year, which is about the median income in this country, they'd be facing about a $1,700 tax hike. That's an enormous tax hike, but there's a little bit of an asterisk there, because if we allow this tax package to expire, we're going to see millions of jobs lost. So that is a tax increase only if they're able to keep their job as the economy takes an unavoidable nosedive if we do allow this tax increase to take place. So this is critically important. Congress has to get this passed and have to do it right if we're going to get economic growth and get this country back on track.
Yeah, let me explore something else here with you, Brandon, because the president has been, well, very clear. that he would not raise taxes on anyone, and yet the populist wing of the party is now floating around the idea of taxes on incomes over $1 million. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a disastrous idea, and I think President Trump, in a recent truth, has pretty much smacked this down, but like bad ideas tend to do, this one could pop back up. So we need to make it abundantly clear to Congress, to folks in the administration, and of course the president himself, how detrimental this would be. And it's not just a matter of raising taxes on wealthy people. Sure, there's a lot of people doing really well out there, but it's a matter of raising taxes on the business community. So many businesses, the majority of businesses, pay not on the corporate schedule, but on the individual schedule. They're called pass-through entities. And essentially, we'd be raising taxes on all of these job creators, all these small business owners that make this economy strong. That's why this is such a bad idea. And I think it needs to be absolutely taken off the table as we piece together a critically important piece of tax legislation.
Yeah, I use S-corps as an example. That's a flow-through tax structure for small companies. The kind of companies that have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 employees. It flows through somebody's individual tax return. And people say, well, look, they're making $2 million. Look how wealthy they are. But they're not, because they're paying employees and they're paying capital investment and they're doing different things because people don't understand how business works oftentimes, and yet they talk about it. It's a common problem in America. People talking about things they have no idea what they're talking about. Brandon, you and I deal with that probably a lot. And so you cannot raise taxes on these folks because it'll be devastating. It will put small business owners that are the backbone of this country out of work, out of business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the secret sauce that we achieved in 2017 was, what tax nerds talk about, broadening the base, getting rid of credits and deductions, and lowering the rate. And that's what created the economic boost that we saw. That's why we saw all these jobs. That's why we saw businesses stop moving overseas, instead invest in this country, grow the economy, create jobs, push wages upward. And we did all that, of course, it's important to say, while keeping inflation relatively low, something that we haven't had the luxury of enjoying since the pandemic and since the Biden administration. So we solved a lot of problems there. I don't know why people are talking about reinventing the wheel here. Maybe instead of lowering taxes, we'll raise taxes this time. It is absolutely absurd. Let's do what worked in 2017. We don't need to get too complicated here. Let's make a simple, clean tax code that encourages work, investment, savings, all the things that we want to see for a booming economy.
Absolutely true. And Brandon, everybody knows if the economy is booming 1 year from today, or a little bit more than a year from today, that Donald Trump would probably do very well for his team in the midterm elections. If the economy is not in good shape 1 year from today or a little bit more, the midterms could be a bloodbath, could be a disaster. So lowering taxes, big winner. Getting the tariffs figured out and opening up trade in a robust way with all the countries around the world on an even playing field would be a big winner. There's a lot that has to happen. They're doing everything they can. I'll give you the last word. Where do we need to go from here?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I would add deregulation, another huge piece of getting the economy booming again, moved in the wrong direction over the last 4 years. And I know that's something that Trump is working on very, very aggressively. But yeah, the next few weeks as Congress tackles this reconciliation bill, all of these enormously important issues, getting spending under control, getting better tax policy locked in, that's going to be absolutely critical. And fingers crossed, I'm optimistic, cautiously so, that we can get this right, get the economy back on track, and get this country moving forward as it ought to be moving.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. Looking at the numbers today, the Dow's up almost 500 points. The NASDAQ up 2.5%, 400 points. S&P 500 in the green, and they're all in the green, have been this week. It has not made up all the losses from a couple of weeks ago, Brandon, but it feels like some of the jitters are out of the market. That's a pretty good place to start. Brandon, thank you for being here, as always.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. All right, up after the break, California community colleges have been siphoned for $13 million to tout enrollment rates, and even more shocking, some of the recipients were not even in the same state. What? I'll explain coming up.
tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro.
Steve Bannon.
Now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to values or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room in a culture that celebrates the weak. Show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
You asked, and we heard you, America.
Real America's Voice is coming to iHeartMedia.
Yes, Real America's Voice is now breaking through the white noise of the mainstream media.
Just download the iHeart app, and you'll have all of us right at your fingertips.
Scan the QR code and start streaming RAV anywhere you want.
Real America's Voice, available whenever you need us.
It's never been easier to stay connected with the voices you trust.
RAV on iHeart means you can take us with you wherever you go.
This is huge. The truth on iHeart. Ready whenever you are. From Charlie Kirk to Steve Bannon, Jack Posobiec to Grant Stinchfield, you'll find all your favorite RAV hosts in one place.
You can listen on Spotify, Apple, Pandora, or Amazon. RAV is now available everywhere you get your podcasts. All you need to do is scan the QR code right now.
Download the iHeart app today and get ready for Real America's Voice.
Scan the QR code and join the RAV movement. They tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro.
Steve Bannon.
Now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to values or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room in a culture that celebrates the weak. Show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
You asked, and we heard you, America.
Real America's Voice is coming to iHeartMedia.
Yes, Real America's Voice is now breaking through the white noise of the mainstream media.
Just download the iHeart app, and you'll have all of us right at your fingertips.
Scan the QR.
You're wrong. You're just doing this. It's time for the kids. I thought it was nice. What did you think? You saw that? Did you check that out?
I did. And I also saw a reporter that wasn't far from me stand up on a ladder whenever President Trump had just stepped into the Easter egg roll area and peppered him with some questions about the defense secretary. And I thought it was a very inappropriate time to do that. That was not the time to start screaming policy questions when he's trying to interact with these kids on this Easter event. So Hegseth, as you know, is very versed with the media. He knows how to handle them. He's very savvy with the reporters. So I think he did handle himself. Yeah, he did a great job at that.
Beautiful day out there. Look, you're dressed for. You looked very Eastery today, Brian. You look, very Eastery. I'll just say that.
Yeah. I went ahead and retired the Italian tablecloth, and I broke out. And this is a new suit I just got the other day, so I try to look presentable for you, Steve.
Very nice. Brian Glenn, everybody. He is the Real America's Voice Chief White House correspondent. Brian, as always, thank you very much for being here. I think we'll just wrap it up with Brian there today. Greatly appreciate him being here. Thank you, sir. Don't forget tomorrow, we begin the broadcast day for Real America's Voice right here with me every morning. I get up early just for you. I burn the midnight oil, as they say, and I get up just for you to be here at 6 a.m. Hot coffee, hot conversation, and Real America's Voice. How do you beat that, right? And then, of course, I dust myself off and come back for America's Voice Live every afternoon. So I'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks, guys.
Hello, my friend. Pat Boone here. You know our country's under financial assault like never before. Our government has put us $34 trillion in debt. The interest alone's more than we spend on military defense. And what's worse, other countries no longer believe the U.S. is a safe place to invest. There's a growing international movement to dump U.S. dollars at a record pace. Some economists say this may signal the end of the dollar. Now, these countries are instead buying gold, and I'm suggesting you do the same. My friends at Swiss American.
All right. In December 2023, it was reported of fake student accounts to financial aid from California's community college system. I know you're shocked. The more alarming part is that this problem to this day. Now, nearly 2 years later, a congressional coalition led by Representative Young Kim is drawing overdue attention to the crisis, and it is a crisis. Data suggests that 1/3 of applicants to the California community college system last year may have been fabricated identities used to harvest over $13 million in federal funds and state aid. Can you imagine? It's clear. California community colleges are playgrounds for fraud and failure, so much so that Congress really needs to step in. Here to discuss this, campus reform higher education fellow, Professor Matthew Garrett. Professor, this is an unbelievable statistic that you're sharing with me here. I'd like to say I'm shocked. I'm not. I'm disgusted, but not shocked. What do you make of this?
Well, you know, the California budget for education, K to 14, is really quite bloated, and there's a few reasons for that. Part of it's tied to propositions that moved funding to the state level and then tied it to the state budget, and it just really distanced local oversight. But the result is a $21 billion budget that's rewarding colleges for enrolling people regardless of whether they actually exist or not. And this is a playground for, and it's just a recipe to invite fraudulent accounts for the purposes of inclusion and trying to get as many students as possible without really a concern for what education should be about, which is improving students' lives.
Yeah, you know, Professor, it's this sort of thing that makes me think, wow, this is why we to find this. And here we have fraud and abuse together. I don't know anybody not know how you're abused. Abscond, flat out. I mean, this is it.
I think you're breaking up a little bit there.
They tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro.
Steve Bannon.
Now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to denounce religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room. In a culture that celebrates the weak, show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
I want the viewers to understand of what's going on when they're talking about this particular deal is Zelensky came out and said many times during the war, you know, if you don't have money, then give us credit and we'll pay it back. Well, I think Trump is holding up his end of the bargain saying, look, this isn't going to be foreign aid anymore. This is going to be a foreign investment with a return clause, right? I mean, President Trump basically has reclassified Ukraine from a charity case to a capital partner. Because let's be very, very honest with ourselves. When we talk about these rare earth elements, they are essential from everything from our missile guidance systems to our microchips. And if we don't secure the supply chain, China will. And they do not believe in free markets. They believe in control. So, you know, this is very important. And let's not forget the domestic angle that Trump is playing here. Those minerals come here to be refined, processed, used. That means American jobs, American infrastructure, and American production. And that's a win for the Rust Belt and not just for Kiev.
You know, I go back to a headline that I heard I'm going to say 2021-22. I'm going to have to trust you a little bit on this. But there was a major discovery of rare earths in northern Minnesota. And with lightning speed, the Biden administration came in and said, no, off limits, just off limits. Why do the Democrats have this propensity to continue to block America from using its natural resources? I don't care what the natural resource is. Timber, water, farmland, oil, coal, gas. They just want to block us from using the natural resources we have, which would make America incredibly prosperous. I don't understand it.
Well, look, the problem is they're the Democrats. And name me one Democrat that's ever run a multinational corporation like Trump. He understands business. The bottom line, this is what conservative foreign policy looks like: real assets, real strategy, and really a real return to the American taxpayer, because that's jobs, Steve. I mean, at the end of the day, this is when you look at what's going on, if we do not lead the reconstruction of this, someone else will. And as history tells us, you know, it's not the U.S. writing the rules, it's China. And they don't believe in free markets, they believe in control. And I've said that. Now, that's my line. I'm sticking to it because, you know, this is what we need to be doing in America.
Absolutely. We absolutely need to be more involved with working with our own. Look, we have more natural resources than any piece of real estate in the world, of the things that I just rattled off. And yet, to save some toad or some fish that you've never heard of or whatever it might be, the Democrats will block everything. I firmly believe the Endangered Species Act, as a single example, has been abused time and time again. I think NOAA has abused its power in attacking the American fishing industry. I believe I could go right down the line and talk about how government agencies have blocked American business time and again. The Keystone XL pipeline, an easy attack on American business. We need to get back in the game, get rid of regulation, open up our own natural resources, and prosper, Hunter. That's what we have. It's mandatory from where I sit.
100%. It's a matter of national security, and it's a matter of American preservation. I mean, look at it. When these Democrats sit here and you look at where my taxpaying dollars come, my taxpaying dollars are being used to research the, you know, and you look at these bills, research the, you know, some crazy animal in Australia or something. I mean, it's absolutely asinine, and it's hurting the American people. It's hurting the American economy. And these other countries laugh at us. That's why I think China, you know, Trump is doing this with China because, you know, America is such a rich country. We're rich in people, we're rich in resources, and you know, it really is God's country. That's what we call it. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think we need to focus on what Trump said, and that's make America prosperous again. And that starts by focusing in on what we have here and what we have now. And
America's Voice family.
Are you on Getter yet? No?
What are you waiting for?
It's free.
It's uncensored, and it's where all the biggest voices in conservative media are speaking out.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
That's right. You can follow all of your favorites. Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, Jack Posobiec.
And so many more.
And the best part?
You can watch Real America's Voice right there on Getter.
Live.
So join the conversation.
Hop on the Getter chat room.
Engage with patriots who are just like you.
Good morning, Getter friends.
We're breaking news, we're delivering the truth,
And we're doing it on Getter
Every single day. So don't wait. Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
It isn't just an app. It isn't just a social media platform. It's a community.
There it is. There it is. Press the button, lady. All right, young man. Press the button. There you go. Vista Equity Partners. Again, stock exchange, markets. We'd like to just give you updates on what's going on. Why is it important? Dow Jones up 480, almost 500 points. Nice move up. S&P, nice move up. NASDAQ up 457, the biggest mover up. Great. VIX, again, we've been talking about the VIX. VIX comes down. That means things are calming down. The tension, the nervousness in the market is calming down. Always good. Always good. And folks who say, well, don't worry, those are only Wall Street people, that's not the case. That is not the case. There are 70% of Americans who have some sort of investment in a stock through maybe a pension fund or a 401k or something. And then there are the other folks who are trying to start small businesses. And the way you start a small business a lot of times is that you're taking loans and you're using the capital markets to help access money so you can start your small businesses. The vast majority of MAGA voters are working in small businesses in one shape or form. They either own their own or they work for a small business. Something like 75% of the country, right? So it matters all the way down to the small business level. So over on one of the chats, I'm going to say the Rumble chat, they get mad at me when I talk about the stock market, but it's not because I like the elitists on Wall Street. I don't give a shit. It's crap about them. Sorry. I don't give crap about those people. I care about Main Street, not Wall Street. And Main Street is 1 billion% affected by what happens on Wall Street, no matter what you say. Some of the big movers and shakers started as small stocks, and it was a good day. The point is, it was a good day, and that's something we should all be happy about. Don't be mad because some fat cats on Wall Street are making money today, because they are, because this trickles down to the economy. This is important. We've lost a lot of market value, and we want to get that back, and Trump is working hard to do that. But something is happening in America right now. It's almost like someone flipped a switch because all of the mainstream Democrats simultaneously started race baiting again, the same toxic approach that they took. Well, it helped them lose the election. Let's start with Sunny Hostin, that lunatic on The View, who's always been very creative in her storytelling. It may seem like The View star simply says whatever she wants, but I think there's actually a very deep level of thought that goes into her mind-boggling rants. Her latest well-thought-out theory about Trump has to do with the president's plan to encourage having babies. She, of course, decided to make this all about race and pitched a confusing and racist theory about Trump's true motives. Gotta watch this.
I want to reframe the issue a little bit, because when I look at something like this, these proposals, I want to know why, and I want to know who's making them. And so when I looked into that, they're saying that the U.S. birth rate is declining. However, in 2024, there was a 1% increase in U.S. births. But that increase was with Hispanic mothers and Asian mothers. So they don't seem to be concerned about that increase. They seem to be more concerned about a decrease in other populations.
Say it.
No, I think I said enough.
It's not based on that.
And so, well, it's just based on a study. And so the other thing
but
I will.
Have they said that anywhere? I mean, I feel like it could be fair.
It's just as fair to hope. It's just a.
Have they said that this is to target only white families?
Oh, I didn't say that.
You have to read
between the lines. I just gave the stats.
They're not going to say it. About economics. They're wanting people to pay in.
I'm just giving.
Japan has had a major crisis. They had a baby crisis. The population was growing. It was aging, and there weren't enough babies being made made in Japan. So the older population, the younger population wasn't expanding fast enough to support the aging older population. And it's a real struggle there. The same theories, the same view is happening in the United States right now. It's the early stages. So Trump saying they'll give a $5,000 baby credit has nothing to do with race or the amount of white people in the country or black people or minorities in the country. It has to do with, as our population ages, we need a bigger support. We need a bigger tax base by young people to support Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It has nothing to do with race, you nut jobs. Next up, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, a name that nobody has said in months, talking about his black adopted children.
Have you thought about, like, when your son gets older, his experience in the world probably different from yours? Like, how would you have those combos with him? Or even, let's say, your daughter, like, learning to deal with her hair, it's going to be a little difficult. Like, how have you thought about these things? Do they concern you?
We think about it all the time, and it's not like we have it all figured out. So we were in... but
if anybody knows how important identity is, you know.
Of course. So we were in what's called a surprise adoption scenario. So we literally, I was at work, I was traveling, we got a phone call, Chasten called me, and the next day we were in a rural Midwestern hospital holding him in our arms. We said that we wanted to adopt without regard for race. By the way, anybody who says race is not a thing in this country should experience an adoption process where there are literally different lists. If you say that you want a white kid only, versus if you say that doesn't matter.
I mean, you can make everything about race, can't you, on the left? I have a niece. My niece is white. She adopted seven Hispanic children. 7. Had 2 of her own, adopted 7. So stop with this race crap. It's just, what is it? What is it with the Democrats? The race baiting continued yesterday over at CNN. Fortunately, Scott Jennings was there to diffuse some of the stupidity. Listen to this clip from their daily disaster panel.
It's about making sure that there is white supremacy in this country. And if we're honest, we will say that.
But we're treated to sort of similar comments to what Kerry made tonight about race, white supremacy, all of Trump's ideology and people and voters and everything. It's all about white supremacy. This was rejected in the election. Democrats ran this was the animating thing of the Harris campaign, and it was rejected.
What?
And I am constantly shocked at what you're not aware of, which is Donald Trump's performance.
I'm constantly shocked with what you're not aware of.
I don't know. I tend to be more right about it than you are. But the reality is he did better. He did better among minority voters than any Republican in a half a century.
Yeah,
he seemed to be totally unaware of it.
But it's also true.
But if you're going to come out and call half the country a white supremacist, I think you've got to explain it.
I love Scott Jennings. Scott Jennings, by the way, should replace Mitch McConnell, who it's time for you to step away, Mitch. Listen, I'm all about talking about Nancy Pelosi getting out of the race, talking about Joe Biden being too old to be president. Mitch McConnell's too old to be the senior senator in the Senate right now. Scott Jennings would be a good junior senator there. Of course, if the Democrats decided to engage in a party-wide race-baiting attack on America, you just know that Michelle Obama, well, she wants to get in on that. Here's the former First Lady talking about how black women apparently don't articulate their plan or their pain.
We don't articulate as black women our pain because it's almost like nobody ever gave us permission to do that.
And does anyone care?
Yeah, there's that.
They care.
If we knew, I think we would care. If we knew.
Mm-hmm.
If we knew.
Or, and we have to ask ourselves, the men in our lives is, why wait to be asked?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like what we go through is pretty obvious. I mean, maybe we're not complaining, but we're actually living life out loud.
Mm-hmm.
The men in her lives, are they still together even? Unfortunately, there are a lot of Democrat women that idolize Michelle Obama. This is why race baiting can be so detrimental. You take someone like Michelle, who has a massive following virtually everywhere, and you allow her to make those insane and completely untrue comments about not being as important as a black woman in society, and her followers actually listen. They start to believe it. They believe that there's truth in what she's saying. That's the danger to letting these unhinged Democrats run their mouths like this, because when you end up allowing that to happen, you also end up with clips like this.
I really can't believe it's people in the comments of this student loan situation talking about this is how the world works. You borrow money, you pay it back. Shut your stupid up. A fucking school loan ain't the same as an auto loan or a home loan or a personal loan, you idiot. Black people, minorities especially, had to go to school. We ain't left. We had to go to school. I had no choice but to go to school.
You know, it didn't work, and for 4 years, actually for probably a dozen years since Barack Obama came along, they've been playing the race card. It didn't work. Trump showed he increased minority vote massively. No one thought he could do the numbers he did with Hispanics and in the black vote, and it's still the black vote still only comes in around 15 or 18% for the most popular Republican in, as Scott Jennings said, 5 decades. Black people got to come around and see that this isn't about race. This is about having a better lifestyle for everyone. Everyone. MAGA accepts everyone. Tampon Tim decided to join in on the fun, claiming fathers, not illegal invader gang banging members that beat the crap out of their wives, but loving, caring fathers are being mistreated by Trump's ICE department. Listen to this.
Now, in this land of the free and home of the brave, we have university students being swept up, shoved into unmarked vans, and fathers being tossed into Salvadorian gulags without a hint of due process. So I want to be real clear about this. If you say you love freedom, but you don't believe freedom is for everybody, then the thing you love isn't freedom, it's privilege.
Fun-loving fathers, not illegal gangbangers. Ridiculous. Time pound too. This guy's got to go. Another note. Here's your weekly reminder that it might be time for term limits. As if old Joe wasn't enough of a spectacle for this argument, here's a confused, disoriented Nancy Pelosi slurring into a mic.
Poston for Arcadia Produce for hosting us today. This is a remarkable place. I hope you had a chance to see the force of it all. Small businesses like Arcadia are the lifeblood of the American economy, with their great optimism, entrepreneurialism, and courage. It is a privilege to join so many small business owners and community leaders during this cost of living week in America. All over the country, House Democrats are having events with the community about bringing down the cost of living. That was something the president promised in the campaign, but the exact opposite is happening now.
So Nancy Pelosi, aging 85 years old, time to step aside, term limits, or just step aside. Mitch McConnell, I mentioned earlier. You too, Mitch. Sorry, because I said it about Joe Biden. Dianne Feinstein was literally almost brain dead while she was still voting. She thought she was voting. She wasn't even voting. All right, folks, we'll be back in 2.5 minutes. Got some great stuff for you coming up after the break. Swiss Arch, beautiful, beautiful place. Beautiful arch. Tough city. Really tough city, folks. All right. You know I buy gold. I hold on to all the gold I've ever bought. I've never, ever sold an ounce of gold that I bought, and I've been buying it for 30 years. It's an asset that will always bring returns. Join me now to talk about why gold prices are surging is precious metal specialist of Birch Gold, the Birch Gold Group, Philip Patrick. Philip, good to have you on, my friend. I tell the audience, and it's a true story. I still have the first ounce of gold I've ever bought. And I used to buy gold. I walk into gold coins stores and buy gold and whatnot. But there's a smarter way to buy gold now, and it's through Birch. And by the way, $3,400 an ounce, my friend. The first ounce of gold I bought was $600 an ounce.
You're dating yourself, but it's crazy. I mean, the last few years, gold has been going through the roof, and it's not a surprise, right? It's in direct response to escalating global economic uncertainties. Fundamentals right now are strengthening every single day for gold. We're seeing the dollar obviously falling in value. We're seeing trade wars escalate with retaliatory tariffs coming back on the US. And as a result of all of these uncertainties, investors are buying gold. It is a time-honored safe haven asset, and it is moving at a growing pace, as you know well. So no surprise to those in the industry, and we expect it to continue to move.
You know, you're the expert. I've been trading gold for 30 years. Let me just ask you this. It's always been known as a safe haven asset, but it's also an asset in good times too. Gold doesn't seem to have a real negative for it. People just realize that it's something you need to, it's tangible. It's got value versus paper money.
You're exactly correct. Look, it's a commodity, and commodities increase at a steady rate over time, consistently. So we always see that with gold throughout history. Today, gold is becoming a growth asset, right? And certainly this century, it's outperformed most financial markets significantly, and it's because of the drivers that we're talking about: inflation, dollar devaluation, potential recession. Listen, we built a bubble for a long time. The Biden administration juiced the markets for years and amassed debt. We're dealing with the realities of that today as the Trump administration works to sort of let the air out of the bubble and rebuild. And precious metals in these climates grow very aggressively. Predictions now are raising day on day on day. Goldman Sachs raised gold to $39.50 by the end of the year, or potentially $4,500, depending on what happens with recession. So we're expecting a good climate in front of us.
So it's almost like the gold increases in value in good times, and in times of fear and panic, it really increases in value a lot more. I'm not just selling gold here. I'm just telling you this from 30 years of experience. I mean, there have been a couple downturns in gold, but it bounces right back. There was one point that people were concerned that Bitcoin would become the next gold, and it never really materialized. Why do you think that happened?
Look, it's still working its way out. Bitcoin is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum to gold. Conceptually, there's similarities. It's finite, etc. But it's more speculative, it is way more volatile, and ultimately it's not a commodity in the same sense. Central banks haven't latched onto it in the same way that they have with gold. Gold is a move to stability. Crypto, Bitcoin is more of a growth play, I would say. The other thing to mention is Bitcoin's been moving almost in lockstep with the NASDAQ, so it's not a contrarian play versus gold, which is. But central banks buy it for stability.
You got to have it. You got every portfolio on the planet should have it. Smart investing. Phil Patrick, thank you for your time, and you guys are great at Birch. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks. New York Attorney General Letitia James couldn't stay out of the spotlight. She's gotten herself into more hot water for alleged mortgage fraud. My next guest is the senior member of the Council for National Policy and the president of Judicial Watch. We're happy to have Tom Fitton join us to talk about this case. Good to have you on, my friend. Tom, long time, my friend. Let's cut right to it. Is there a chance we can see Letitia James in cuffs in a perp walk?
Maybe. I mean, certainly she's now going to be subject to a serious criminal investigation, at least with respect to fraud related to her properties in New York and I think in Virginia. And the charges against her, the concerns about her misconduct, really almost literally mimic the fake charges and concerns she raised about what President Trump supposedly did with his properties and his businesses up in New York. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. There are serious claims here. Now, she may have defenses. I don't know. I don't want to say she's, quote, guilty. That's what the left does. But certainly she should be, if the American people are going to be assured that justice is applied fairly and equally, be subject to a serious criminal investigation, as has been recommended by a substantial federal agency, the FHFA. They don't send these things over lightly, and she's a senior government official, so there's going to be added scrutiny as to what she did and the representation she made as to whether they were false or not, in a way that benefited her mortgages and her tax status.
Do you think
her tax liability?
So there's a criminal referral from that housing department. Justice Department will pick, Pam Bondi will pick it up and decide to prosecute. I'm guessing it'll be a yes. I don't know. I take yes. I make odds on yes. Criminally as well as, is there possible for civil lawsuits against her as well? Can Trump sue her civilly?
Oh, that's a good question. And I don't know if there's a civil remedy that the Justice Department or the FFHA have on this. Certainly, if there are crimes associated at the federal level, the question is, are there state-level crimes as well, or civil crimes, either in Virginia and New York? So you raise a good question. And I want to take a step back. What also she should be under criminal investigation for, and everyone else who I believe she co-conspired with, is the deprivation of President Trump's civil rights under color of law. And that's the collusion and conspiracy and criminality that should be front and center for this Justice Department and FBI, or whoever is designated to investigate it by President Trump, which is what I recommend he do, which is to have a special counsel investigate the lawfare against him that nearly destroyed our country.
Tom, some of the things she's accused of doing are just blow me away. Number one, at one point she said I believe it's her Virginia property that was her primary residence. Meanwhile, she was the Attorney General with her office in New York, and she was there every day. And then name some of the other. Didn't she say that she was married to her own father to get some sort of sweetheart loan in another deal? Tell us some of her crimes.
Eric, that was an accident. That was an accident. Her property up in New York, there's a question about whether she reported the actual number of units there in a way that saved her taxes, right? If the accurate number was given, she would have had a more significant tax liability. So this is exactly what I shouldn't say exactly, but it's unlike what she accused Trump of doing, which is basically getting loans that he paid back and pretending that what he filed in those papers was wrong, when in fact they weren't. There's specific things that are alleged here that were specifically wrong, and she's personally responsible for. None of that was true with Trump, yet she wanted to destroy his companies over it. And similarly, she should be subject to the same type of scrutiny in the least.
So Biden, with all those pardons he handed out, he didn't hand out a preemptive pardon to Letitia James?
Who knows? Maybe there's one in his drawer. Maybe he's keeping it in his garage in Delaware. We just haven't found it yet.
Just look in the corner in that box behind the Corvette. What blows me away is that she said that Mar-a-Lago is worth $18 million, and Trump was like, are you kidding me? The one parking spot in Mar-a-Lago is worth $18 million. And then she played the same game with values of properties to get sweetheart loans. So I got to think. Tom, you're a lawyer.
I'm not a lawyer.
I thought you were. All right. Be a judge for a minute then. You think she's guilty? And this is just pure speculation, folks. I mean, we can do this. We can play this. Do you think she can be convicted of the things that she tried to convict Trump of?
Based on the evidence that's been presented, there's a basis for a criminal prosecution and an investigation. And, she may say, look, the paperwork you have is incomplete. And this is the complete paperwork, and it shows I didn't engage in any fraud.
Yeah.
But if the charges are borne out, the question is, why won't she be prosecuted? If the evidence is, as has been presented she's been presented to the Justice Department, I don't think they have any choice but to pursue this.
I want to see her on a stand the way we saw Fani Willis on a stand, and I just want them to grill her the same way they did Fani, and Fani broke, and I think Letitia James will broke too. Just the Trump derangement syndrome fever might be worth the price of admission. Tom Fitton, always good to have you, my friend. We'll get you back again.
Good to be with you. Yep, thank you.
All right, folks, 2.5. We'll be right back. Supposedly a beautiful place, just right over the border of North Carolina, South Carolina border, Asheville, and that's the Biltmore Estate. Really, really well known. All right, folks, think about it. Every dollar you spend is either supporting your values or working against them. In today's economy, where you spend your money matters. That's how we take back our country. Patriot Mobile is leading the way as America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Switch today without sacrificing quality or service. You'll get exceptional nationwide coverage because unlike most budget wireless providers, Patriot Mobile has access to all 3 major U.S. networks. You can even add 2 numbers on 2 networks on 1 phone, something the big guys just can't even do. Stay connected with flexible, unlimited data plans to fit your lifestyle. These plans offer high-speed data, mobile hotspots, international roaming, device protection, and even internet backup. Here's the best part. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're supporting faith, family, and freedom. If you believe in our First and Second Amendment rights, the sanctity of life, and supporting our veterans, this is where you belong. Switching is simple. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade. Patriot Mobile's 100% US-based team will get you activated in minutes. Right now, go to patriotmobile.com/RAV or call 972-PATRIOT to get a free month of service with promo code RAV. Make the switch. Defend freedom with every call and text. That's patriotmobile.com/RAV or call 972-PATRIOT. Well, January 6th keeps popping back up, only this time it's been found that it was a politically driven conspiracy by anti-Trump FBI agents and prosecutors, and that the White House counsel's office back at the time, Biden's handed over cell phones used by President Trump and former Vice President Mike Pence. Here to discuss the CEO and editor-in-chief of Just the News, John Solomon. John, this is pretty damning. We want to talk deep state.
It is.
Deep state to the T right here. Tell us what you know.
Yeah. Well, listen, this started 2 years ago when we first obtained a memo showing that the White House counsel under Joe Biden instructed the National Archives to sic the FBI on Donald Trump in the classified records case. That's an extraordinary thing in of itself. The Democratic White House trying to get a criminal investigation started against its most likely Republican foe in the 2024 election. The memo was unequivocal. It was very clear what was done, and that's what started the classified records case prosecution against President Trump. We now know that Jack Smith, the other person, the guy that was also pursuing not only that case, but also January 6th and other cases like it, reached out to the White House and tried to secure President Trump's phones and Mike Pence's phones. And even though there were issues potentially surrounding executive privilege and other things, Joe Biden's White House arranged to go get those phones and get them to prosecutors so they could spy on and figure out who and what Donald Trump was doing on those phones. Now, in an ordinary world, there would be a subpoena. The subpoena would go to the custodian of the phone, like Donald Trump, if it was you and me, and or to the provider, and you'd have to meet a threshold of the court, and then they would turn the records over, or we, in unique circumstances like journalists, would get an opportunity to object, saying, hey, we have reporting duties on there we need to protect. That did not happen here. They took the easy route because Joe Biden and the Justice Department were working together to get Trump.
A couple important pieces of information here, if you know. Who sent the note from the White House to the Justice Department to open up this investigation? Where did it come from? Do we know?
It came from a deputy counsel who doesn't work there anymore. Obviously, doesn't work there, but he left the Biden administration halfway through. He sends a note to the legal counsel and head of archives saying, we believe you should make a criminal referral to the FBI to go after Donald Trump. And that's how that started. Literally, it's the genesis of the case. Before that time, they were negotiating like they always do when a president leaves. Listen, every president leaves office, and there's not a complete historical record. It takes months to get things synchronized and together. But in this case, Donald Trump didn't get the runway, the courtesy, the ordinary gestures that every other president working with the archives would get. This was, let's weaponize this and turn this into a criminal act and go get them going. And that's what they did. There were people in the FBI I've talked to. They thought it was crazy what was going on.
That's conspiracy right there. That is what the prime definition, the Webster or Harvard, if you choose definition of conspiracy. The phones that they secured, Trump's and Pence's, White House phones, White House apparatus that they were given, because Trump historically and famously, I think he pretty much tries not to carry a phone with him, right?
Yeah, well, I think President Trump keeps a phone pretty handy, actually. My understanding is he does from my reporting. But, they're circumspect what they use, and they have different phones, right? There are phones that they use for classified conversations versus I'm calling my pal out and to go golfing, right? And so every president usually has a series of phones that they use. But it is rather remarkable. When the president is out and about in the field, I doubt he carries a cell phone with him because it's a tracking device. And so the Secret Service probably locks that down or shuts it off when he's traveling. But when he's in the residence at home, he generally has a phone. Almost all the presidents have had phones. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
just
John,
like you and me.
Yeah, I know, but I remember for years, and maybe it was the first presidency, and prior to that, it was he didn't want to have a phone with him. He tried not to have a phone, and you're very close with him, so I take your information of mine, certainly. There's another issue that's bubbling up, and I'm seeing this a little bit here and there. ActBlue, big fundraisers for the Democrats, may have been being used by foreign governments or foreign groups. Tell us about that. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, this is something we started over a year ago here at Real America's Voice and Just the News. We began chronicling the concerns that the ActBlue didn't have the normal security protections that would keep foreigners from contributing illegally to campaigns, even though they were collecting hundreds of millions of dollars of small donations into the Democratic Party's coffers all throughout 23-24. Now, keep in mind, this is a Democratic Party that has a history of using illicit foreign money to help them. The Bill Clinton China fundraising scandal in the 90s was an earlier potential version of this. In those days, there was no online fundraising, so you had to get straw donors like Buddhist monks and others to give donations and pretend it was theirs, but it was really China's money. Now, with online fundraising, it can be done really easy. A foreign gift card could be used to make a transaction if there aren't the proper protections. Well, what we learned from our reporting, then followed up by Congress, by people like Chairman Brian Stile in House Administration, and Jim Jordan in House Judiciary, and James Comer on House Oversight, was that the ActBlue was not using any of the basic precautions. They didn't prohibit foreign gift cards from being used as a credit card transaction for donations. They didn't use the CVV number. That's that three-number code in the back of your credit card you use to prove you're the identity holder of the card. They left the back shop wide open, which would allow a foreign power to potentially route money into the elections. James Comer and Brian Stile are both on the record on this network, on my show, saying we believe money from China, Venezuela, Iran, and Russia may have been moved through the ActBlue system to the benefit of either liberal nonprofits or Democratic candidates. Today, we expect as early as today, President Trump will sign an executive order putting new tools into place to first prohibit any further foreign money flowing into elections to nonprofits or to candidates, and then two, ordering the FBI, the Justice Department, and others to make sure that those who may have done it in the past, either through negligence or through intent, that they face full justice under the powers of the government.
Important right there. Negligence or intent. They're all going to say we didn't know, right? So can you still get them for negligence? I didn't know it was a foreign entity that was that the money we were taking in and giving to various Democrats. We didn't know they were from foreign. Is that a viable defense?
It is. It's not a viable defense if you're pursuing them under civil law. So there's a lot of tools available, right? You can pursue someone civilly or criminally, but they were moving millions of dollars. They were basically a transaction company, and if you didn't take the normal prescribed procedures that everyone knows they're supposed to use in today's modern marketplace, you can make an argument under civil law, maybe criminal law, that there's a lot going on. Last Friday, we broke the story that Jim Jordan, Comer, and Stile have demanded interviews with all the executives. A lot of the executives are fleeing ActBlue right now as the spotlight's on them. They're about to face depositions in Congress. We're going to learn a lot more in the next few weeks. This is becoming a potentially very big scandal. President Trump adding new tools to the investigative side, hopefully as early as today.
Awesome. Great stuff. It's great. The conspiracy theories happen to be actual conspiracies most of the time, actually. Really good, John. Your investigative work is just bar none, top notch. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you at 6 p.m. on Just the News. By the way, I have a call, off the record call with Kash Patel in maybe 30 minutes or so. So I'll get a little bit more information. So really good talking to you, though.
Cool. Thanks, buddy. Good to be with you.
All right, John. Talk to you soon. All right, before we head to break, just wanted to remind you all about my podcast and YouTube page, both updated daily. You can hear this show, of course, but tons of other content anywhere, anytime, because when you subscribe, you can pick it up and watch it and listen to it anytime, anywhere, but you must hit those subscribe buttons, and it's always free. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. Fortuna, Costa Rica. And Mad Dog tells me that's a restaurant right there. Beautiful. By the way, if that is a restaurant and that's a bar there, I would love to be sipping a vodka club with the orange twist on it. Look at that water. Beautiful. All right, wait. So apparently it's not a good idea to place a sniveling little snowflake brat at the top of your party. Turns out that if you place an entitled know-it-all with no skills, no experience, and exactly zero knowledge of politics in the real world as your vice chair, ain't going to go well. This child, David Hogg, gets voted in as vice chair of the DNC, which tells you everything you need to know about the state of the Democrat Party right now. And he immediately comes in and tries to unseat AOC as the most annoying and least qualified Democrat politician in the leftist cesspool, because David is on a campaign to primary old guard incumbents. Ooh, let's just let the Civil War begin. I'm up for watching this. And when Timu Obama, also known as Hakeem Jeffries, was asked what he thinks about David Hogg trying to play Jenga with the Democrat Party, here's what Timu Obama had to say.
What's your response to this idea of targeting some of your Democratic incumbents?
Well, I look forward to standing behind every single Democratic incumbent, from the most progressive to the most centrist and all points in between.
Ooh, and the plot thickens. Democrats have issued the kid an ultimatum. Either stop with this primary the incumbents nonsense or leave your post as DNC vice chair, which again, it's comical he got to begin with. And it's getting good. It's getting warmer, isn't it, over there on the other side of the aisle? As in, it's getting worse for the Democrats. They're crumbling in the face of MAGA. What a thing of beauty to behold. Want to see the walking example of in over your head? Behold.
This was not an MS-13 gang member, and you damn well know that.
Oh, come on.
He was not.
Okay,
and
so keep defending this guy.
The administration admitted this was wrong. In America, we have due process, and we are a land of law and order. We are a land of law and order. And this administration is repeatedly showing time and time again they do not care about what the Supreme Court says. They do not care about the rule of law. And you cannot defend sending people to another country.
Did a poll
to another country where they
most
don't have
Americans
rights,
think that
where he's
all
denied
illegal
counsel,
immigrants
due process,
should be
and so much
deported,
more.
by the way. So you're losing your effort.
Yep, in over your head, my young friend on the left side. Of course, he's MS-13. Every time I see David Hogg, I think, how the heck did this kid get here? He's like a shining beacon of leftist entitlement and snowflakery. And now he's even ticking off one of the Democrat gods, James Carville.
Well, so here's James Carville. Here's what he had to say about your idea. Take a listen.
The most insane thing I ever heard is the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee is spending $20 million running against other Democrats. Aren't we supposed to run against Republicans?
What's your response?
What's his plan to deal with our 27% approval rating? Carville believes in a politics of being timid, of hiding. I believe in fighting. And that is what people want to see right now from the Democratic Party. We just saw an example of that with Senator Van Hollen going to El Salvador.
Well, it looks like the Democrat Party is very much over David's $20 million scheme to purge loyal and lovable Democrats for progressives. And it's led to a vicious ultimatum from Ken Martin, the chair of the DNC, who's basically saying, obey or vanish, David Hogg. The drama's getting good. That even the communists over at CNN are entertained.
All right, let me. I love it so much, though. The David Hogg of all of it, and now the Democrats
girls are fighting.
Oh my gosh, I love it. It's like Housewives now, and they're leaking to the press to be like, David, prepare yourself. We're gonna yell at you later today. It's like the renowned singer JoJo says, it's too little, too late. Like you can't change it now, Democrats. The arsonist is in the house next to the firefighters.
Well, I thought it was bad enough or great enough for us to watch them parade out Jasmine Crockett, AOC. The gang-banger lovers. You thought it was damaging enough to have Jasmine call for illegal migrants to pick cotton or have AOC taking private jets on a fight the oligarchy tour, but actually watching a snot-nosed 25-year-old single-handedly create the Democrat desperate housewives in their party, all while verbally making love to a known MS-13 gang member. It's just beautiful. Christmas comes 8 months early sometimes. Watch Jen Psaki fawn over the snowflake we now know, which makes sense given that she covered for the drooling dementia in chief for way too long.
I love about you that you never hold back and you say what you think. I'm wondering, because James Carville said this was a crazy idea or a bad idea.
Yeah.
Now,
he also predicted we would win the election in a landslide.
A lot of people predicted that.
Of course she loves that he speaks his mind. It's a massive step up from Joe Biden, who had nothing up here to speak with. And now Dick Durbin's retiring. And that means that now 4 Senate Democrats are not going up for re-election in 2024. That's huge. That's massive. Massive opportunity for Republicans. And this child is sitting up there at the top of his party adoring gangbangers and kicking up dirt. What a gift. Truly. Watch.
What we need to be doing is looking to elect people specifically like Senator Van Hollen, who are meeting this moment and not just saying, well, we don't have power, we can't do anything, but, you know, putting action behind his words, going to El Salvador to meet with the man that was abducted by Donald Trump and his administration as an admission of their own accident, like they talked about. We need people that are there to fight and meet this moment and show that Democrats aren't just saying a bunch of talking points or just waiting for midterms to take action against Donald Trump.
Doesn't it just speak volumes that the Democrat Party picked this obvious loser as vice chair? What did they think was going to happen? He's 25 years old. They're vice chair. Well, I'll say it. Keep it coming. The Jasmine Crockett race baiting, the AOC climate hypocrisy, the gang bang lovers escapades, and you know what? I'm all for keeping David Hogg at the top of the DNC. Make him the top. Make him the chairman. And while the Democrat Party continues to implode in new and fascinating ways, the old guard of leftist media continues to prove that they've learned absolutely nothing about why their side lost and about why the country has zero trust in Democrats. And by the way, never will again. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Jim Acosta and Don Lemon, who are so deeply skewed and warped that even CNN had to toss him out the back door.
But I think it's another nail, especially in the confidence that people have in corporate media, the trust that they have in corporate media. And I think that is why folks like you know, over here on Substack doing extremely well. I'm doing okay on Substack. Also,
you're doing great.
YouTube, doing
Watch
well.
Don on Substack. Yeah. Watch Don on YouTube.
Yeah. And so I think that's why we're having such success. And they don't care if you're on the North Lawn and the South Lawn of the White House with pancake makeup on and all the lights and the shiny desks. They want people they like, they trust, and they care about. And I think that's figures like us. People can trust that I'm going to tell them the truth.
It actually boggles the mind. The lack of self-awareness, the truth. Neither one of those two would know the truth if it smacked them right in the face. A little reminder of their BS back in the day.
For all those people who say, oh, the press, CNN hates Trump and the CNN is, loves the Democrats. I watched Manu Raju with Nancy Pelosi, who clearly did not want to answer Manu's questions today, even in her body language. And you know what? He persisted and he asked her the tough questions anyway. So of anyone, a Democrat or Republican, regardless of who it is, if you hold a position of power, we, the journalists at CNN, are going to question you about it, whether you like it or not.
That's right. We're here to hold their feet to the fire. And just because we are pro-truth doesn't mean that we are anti-Trump.
See what they do right there. Speaking the truth doesn't mean we're anti-Trump. Well, Jim, it depends on what your definition of truth is. And yours and the organization you worked for, and spit your butt out has no interest in the truth, quite clearly. Jim Acosta and Don Lemon actually seem to believe that they're saving an industry whose sole purpose was to peddle propaganda and tell lies on behalf of the leftist Marxist propaganda machine and the swampy deep state. 2 CNN washouts. Reminds of this little gem from back in 2018, remember?
This is a lemon. Some people might try to tell you that it's a journalist, that it's not biased, that it retains journalistic integrity after baselessly accusing our president of inciting civil war. Yes, some people might try to tell you that this is a journalist. They might even scream journalist, journalist, journalist over and over again. They might put journalist in all caps. But this is a lemon. Its network colluded with a Democratic presidential candidate. Its colleague gave debate questions to Hillary Clinton. Don't be fooled. This is not a journalist. This is a lemon, a bitter lemon.
See what we did there? Actually, we didn't do it. CNN did it themselves. Pretty much pun intended, Don Lemon. Sorry. What's amazing is this. It's actually quite remarkable that people like Joy Reid, Don Lemon, Jim Acosta were paid millions upon millions of dollars to talk on TV and to suck up the air in the room with repeated lies about President Trump, Russia collusion, Russian disinformation. They spend years talking on TV, and yet they've developed no fan base. They leave TV, and no one's watching them. They're done. No one's interested. That's because the left, which had very little plot to lose in the first place, has lost the plot entirely, and it's been chipping away into a big nothing. Crumble away, Democrats, and we're right here to build it back. Oh, maybe we'll build it back better. What's that you say? Better? Yep, we're going to build it back better, except we actually mean it. Before I head to break, I wanted to remind you about my podcast and YouTube page, both updated daily. You can surely watch and hear this show, but also tons of other new content anywhere, anytime. Be sure to subscribe. It's free, but you got to hit the buttons. You got to hit those subscribe buttons. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. That is a cool place. I've been. Fountain Hills, Arizona is just a beautiful, beautiful place, just outside of Phoenix, Scottsdale area. It's just a wonderful, wonderful, gorgeous, gorgeous place. You know, folks, I love this time of day. As I told you, it's my favorite time of not only the show, but of the day, because Steve Bannon is so cool. He's joining us from the road. I thought we weren't going to have Steve Bannon, but we do have our moment of Bannon and moment of Zen. Some people I need the moment of Bannon. What's up, brother? Where are you on the road? And can you tell us where you are?
Yeah. We're in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm speaking at Hillsdale College's annual conference, so I'm going to be the keynote speaker tonight, and we're going to do the show from here today and tomorrow morning.
Yeah, you rile up the crowd and ask them. Tell them Bowling said that there's better barbecue in Florida than then Kansas, and see what they say. They'll go crazy. They'll go absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
So I want to get to this little full screen in a second, but first I want to set it up with this. Play the soundbite, Mad Dog.
Well, a man like this comes along once every century if we're lucky. We've got him now. He's on fire, and I'm a huge supporter. Want to see him again in 2028.
And obviously, anybody who doesn't like what you say but judges it as a function of a lack of intelligence doesn't know anything about you. I don't make that mistake. You're a smart guy. You know he's term limited. How do you think he gets another term?
We're working on it.
Okay. And the reason why this is relevant, and I want to play a soundbite. So look what by the way, came out on Trump Store, the official Trump Store today. Take a look. Here it is. Steve, can you see it? I hope you have returned. It's a Trump 2028 cap.
What are you talking about? We've ordered ball caps, all the swag. What are you talking about? It's a great day in the war room, baby.
All right, so make us happy. How are we going to? I kind of alluded to.
Hey, Bowling. I don't want to say Rob Sig had a votive candle lit for Trump 2028 since we are the Trump channel. But I'm just saying.
I would take the over on 5 votive candles. Maybe, perhaps that's probably the way to go. But wouldn't that be great? And again, J.D. Vance wins. He picks Trump as his vice president. J.D. steps aside. Trump becomes his third term. Or I guess, who knows? What? Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any ideas? Because Cuomo asked you, how's it going to happen?
I have. What are you talking about? I have a whole team. I have a whole team of some of the smartest lawyers in the nation working on this. We're going to have many different alternatives. President Trump is on the afternoon of the 20th of January of 2029. Eric, you and I will be doing the turnover right here, and we'll be talking about what a great inauguration day for President Trump's third term.
Amen to that, brother. I'm on board. I'm all in. I'm all in. Steve, by the way,
hey, hold it. I got to bring us. I got something. Hold. Go ahead.
No, I'm waiting. Go yours.
No. Today. I can't. I thought you were going to start not with the merch, which is great. I thought you were going to start with the double barrel shotgun blast that President Trump gave Rupert Murdoch this morning on Truth Social, with about the pollster, the phony news, and he threw in the Wall Street Journal for a good minute because he knows
he's not loving them.
That's Rupert's most prized.
He's not loving them over there on 6th Avenue between 48th and 49th right now. It's such a love-hate relationship with them. He hires 19 people from Fox, and then they just. But that poll was BS, Steve. You can play with how you question people with polls. But the good news in the one poll, he's crushing it on he's crushing it on the border. That's what he's doing. He's doing extremely well on the border. So. That's one of his most important ones. What I did want to tell you is that I moved off the Rumble chat because they were just too mean, and I'm back on the Getter chat, and there are a lot nicer people over there. A lot nicer folks on the Getter chat.
Hold it. Holy stuff. Hang on. There's no whining. There's no whining in the handover. You got to go back to the Rumble chat. Rumble chat will make a man out of you. You come in and you got the pirate thing. You got a gun show. You got to get roughed up over the Rumble chat. It's rough over there. It's tough.
So
I
had Lindy Leon, who I think is a Trojan horse. Nice lady. She's so sweet. She's so nice. She talks so, like your sister. And you don't want to be mean, but I know she spent her entire career as a Democrat up until the last moment when Trump won on November 5th, 2024. And then I just don't. I trust but verify. And I know we need everyone and we want to open it to everyone, but you have to Rumble chat. Was telling me I was bullying her.
Hang over a second. And I do. We want to bring in more. We got Democrats, Tulsi Gabbard. Naomi Wolf first came on, audience hated her. You got to work these things in. But brother, you can't say she's so sweet, she's so smiled. That's like, it's honey trap. That's CCP honey trap 101.
Well, tell them.
Very careful.
Tell the folks on. Tell the folks on the Rumble chat.
No. You gotta hold it. One day we're gonna take the training wheels off while you're in the Rumble chat after you've gone full pirate. How's that?
All right. Have a good show, brother. Have a good show and have some Kansas City barbecue. Second.
Love you, brother.
Florida.
Love you, Eric. Yeah. See, I'm here for an hour, and Eric Bolling wants to get me run out of town here in Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. I'm really honored to do the Hillsdale College conference tonight and be the keynote speaker. So we'll get folks fired up, as we do here in the War Room. We are jammed. There's been so much going on this afternoon. And Eric just said President Trump did put up, don't put it up yet. I want to get to it. I want to make a special thing. The merch shop, Trump 2028. It was amazing. I tell you what, we got an incredible cold open, an incredible show, including some live guests here. Let's go ahead and let it rip.
Take a look at the cover of The Economist. Quote, only 1,361 days to go. Showing America's national symbol, the bald eagle, battered and injured and bandaged. A top Trump MAGA donor puts it this way: our national brand is at risk. Take a listen to
America
that.
rose beyond just being a country. It was like an aspiration for most of the world. And we're eroding that brand right now. And if you think of your behavior as a consumer, how many times do you buy a product with a brand on it because you trust that brand? In the financial markets, no brand compared to the brand of the U.S. Treasuries. The U.S. Treasury market, the strength of the U.S. dollar, and the creditworthiness of U.S. Treasuries. No brand came close. We put that brand at risk. And as you and I both know, it can take a very long time to remove the tarnish on a brand. So the president and the Secretary of Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce need to be very thoughtful that when you have a brand, you need to behave in a way that respects that brand, that strengthens that brand. Because when you tarnish that brand, it can be a lifetime to repair the damage that has been done.
Clarify with whom the U.S. is speaking with China. They're saying it's fake news that trade talks are happening.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with